This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10 is the time, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Very good morning to you. I mean, how Anaraki do you think you are on a scale of 1 to 10 when it comes to politics? I like to think that there will be many people who choose to listen to this programme for the entertainment value, whether intentional or unintentional, as opposed to it necessarily being a mark of a particular interest in politics. But we're probably above average, am I right? We're probably a bit more interested in politics than the average bear. Possibly a lot more interested in politics than the average bear. I'm so interested in politics that I was looking up turnout for the last election a moment ago, because I got this sort of thought percolating, if that's the correct word to use, about the political landscape and the reason why Starmer's project has looked so shaky so quickly. It's not unique, actually. I think statistically it might be among, if not the actual worst start in terms of disapproval and approval. But he didn't have particularly high approval ratings when he got into Downing Street. And that's what I was intrigued by. That loveless landslide it was described as, wasn't it? The idea that he wasn't carried into Downing Street on the shoulders of a jubilant nation. I don't know which prime ministers have been historically. I don't have 2020 memory, and neither do you, and we probably don't read enough history books to be fully confident of what happened 20, 30, 40 years ago. In 1978, I was reading this morning, it looked like James Callaghan might actually turn things around, having stepped into the breach of the Labour leadership. I don't know that Margaret Thatcher was heralded in the streets of the country when she got in. One of the lowest turnouts in history was in 2001, Tony Blair's second term, and his first year in Downing Street in 1997 was far from triumphant. So there's never really a consistency to these kind of performances. But I'm fascinated by how few people voted in 2024. It was one of the lowest ever, comparable, as I say, to 2001. And then you'd have to go back, would you believe, to 1918 to move into a similar zone to where we found ourselves in 2024, 2001, and 1918, a nudge ahead actually, but you're looking around just over the 50% mark, below the 60% mark, which when you stop to think about it is absolutely insane. Just barely half of the eligible electorate bothered to cast a vote in 2024. And I suspect that is part of a sense that it doesn't matter who's in charge. And that's why I use the word anarchy to describe those of us who are interested in politics. Where do you have to sit on the socio-economic scale for it not to matter much who's in charge? I'd say you probably have to be an average-ish worker. They're not going to be able to make massive changes to your life. Labour being perceived for years as looking after the extra vulnerable. I think unfairly, actually. They're not that. Tony Blair in particular as Prime Minister changed the lives for the better of millions and millions of people who were neither vulnerable nor desperate. And then the Tories historically perceived as making life better for the already advantaged or the already rich. I think that probably is a fairly fair characterisation. The trick is, of course, to persuade the people who aren't already rich or who aren't already advantaged that they might be one day, and therefore they should also be in support of an obviously unfair and deeply imbalanced system. So it's a weird job being a Prime Minister, a very weird job, and very few people would argue at this point that Keir Starmer is doing it very well. There are lists that they should probably hit more often of things that they've achieved. And that might be an answer to the question that I am about to ask you. But there are also lists of things that are, by any measure, big mistakes. And the reason why you know they're big mistakes is that they have reverse ferreted on them. They have U-turned on them. And this may be included in your answer to the question that I am just about to ask you. And then you've got what you would best describe as the distinction between style and substance. And style is a big problem for this lot, and I wish that it wasn't, because I was not exaggerating or joking when I told you that I thirst for political dullness. The idea of people possessed of political pizzazz being put into power for no reason other than they've put in good performances on chat shows, or they have an extraordinary ability to walk the tightrope between racism and xenophobia without ever quite falling off it. People whose track records demonstrate an absolute absence of application and often even intelligence, but somehow they come across well on television, or they appeal to a large enough rump of the population to get their hands on the NHS, for example. Why would somebody being effective at demonising immigrants be somehow immediately qualified to run the NHS, or to at least oversee the running of the NHS? All sorts of madnesses follow when you prioritise style over substance. Who here would consider Donald Trump to be a substantive president, somebody across the detail, somebody gifted with insights and perspicacity, as opposed to somebody who is effectively a fairground barker flogging snake oil? And the better they are at flogging snake oil, the higher they rise in UK and US politics latterly, culminating in this country for now with Boris Johnson, although of course Johnson 2.0 would be the consequence of a Reform UK victory at a general election, and culminating for now in the US with Trump, who I can't see being superseded. If and when Trump leaves the White House, I can't actually see anybody measurably and obviously worse than him, more populist than him, more race-baiting than him, getting into the White House. But I could be wrong. All of this does nothing, really, except highlight the problem that Keir Starmer faces at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We're also, because we're a bit Anaraki, you and me, we're also minded or prone to set far too much store by a party conference. Do you think that a lollipop lady in Liverpool, actually not Liverpool because the conference is happening there, somewhere else that begins with L, Leominster, there you go, a lollipop lady in Leominster is going to be paying that much attention to Keir Starmer's speech today? I don't know how to police this. I probably shouldn't tell you this. It's a bit too much of a Toto moment. But I don't know how sometimes to recognise the non-anorak nature of political and public discourse. How you know, we're all a little bit addicted to the day-to-day business of Parliament, of politics. In my line of work, and as someone who listens to programmes like this, we're a little bit, a tiny bit, degrees of addiction. Some of us perhaps very addicted, some of us not so much. But we're all a little bit addicted to it, and most people aren't, which is why the turnout was the first thing I looked up when I got to work this morning. Turnout being around about the mid-50s, 56%, down by 4.5% from the previous general election, where people were voting. People were passionate about either not wanting Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister or wanting Boris Johnson to be Prime Minister because they still believed his Brexit lies. Or people, the highest reason given for people who voted Conservative was to keep Jeremy Corbyn out of power. But one of the highest reasons given for people who voted Labour, and more people voted Labour in 2019 than 2024, would be to put Jeremy Corbyn in power. So, again, politicians who appealed and repelled by dint of their personality, their perceived personality, as much as their perceived policies. So most people don't care. It's a horrible thing to realise, especially when you do this for a living. I should play records. Most people don't care enough to vote. Or not most, but a hell of a lot, almost half of the people don't care enough to vote. And yet we every day operate in a universe that presumes everybody is fully engaged. Ready? What would you put in the speech? I don't think this needs particularly nuanced delivery, this question. What would you put in the speech? And that means, what do you want to hear, but also what does he need to say? They're two slightly different things, because some of the stuff that you might want to hear might not be the stuff that he should be putting in the speech today. Still almost 4 years out from a general election, there are some dragons he doesn't need to slay, some mountains he doesn't need to climb, and some truths he probably doesn't need to describe. But what would you put in the speech today? What does he need to say? This is not an oil tanker that's going to be turned around in the space of one speech. And conference is not a speech to the nation, first, second and third. It's a speech to the membership. It's a speech to the troops. It's a speech to the, if not converted, then the certainly sympathetic. And that is something that you need to bear in mind. What do you want to hear from Keir Starmer today? Hear Keir. And I want you to tell me, and you can take this as seriously as you like, do you want to put it in words? Do you actually want to write a line? Two things I'm going to say. I don't want any hilarious jokes saying I resign, and I don't want anybody using AI. Okay? How many times in the coming years together am I going to have to say, please don't use AI? I don't think callers are going to use AI, but texters might. One already has. No offence, Dan, but I'm not reading out something that AI has come up with, although you do have to program it, don't you? So it is, I suppose, an articulation of things that you've told it. But what do you want to hear from Keir Starmer? Serious answers only. And that can be either explanations, mea culpas, or mea culpae, I think would be the correct Latin, or policies. So remember, it's not just, here's £1 million for everybody, which probably wouldn't get you on air because serious answers only, but it could also be, I know that we got this wrong and here is why. So you might want him to explain things. You might want him to announce things. You might want him to account for or atone for things. You might want him to target things. You might want him to share dreams or share ambitions. I just want to know what you want to hear. I'm giving you the job right now at 10:15 on Tuesday morning of writing a sentence, a paragraph, or a page, as much as you want, of Keir Starmer's speech to Labour conference today. A speech that is to the troops, to the faithful, to the unconverted, to the sceptical, and ultimately to the country, to the watching nation. That's why we carry it live. It's why the BBC carry it live. It's why all the major broadcasters carry it live, because it is an opportunity for the leader of the country to address the population, whether they voted for him in 2024, whether they voted at all in 2024 or not. And that actually is quite an important question to ask you. What would you put in the speech? 0345 6060 973. And I think crucially, or not crucially, I've got to stop saying that, interestingly, intriguingly, what wouldn't you put in the speech that you think might be there? What do you want to see a little bit less of? What do you worry we're hearing too much of? So what do you want to hear in the speech? 0345 6060 973. And what do you not want to hear in the Prime Minister's speech? 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You know the rest. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
15 minutes after 10. They give us little tasters of what is going to be in the speech, but I don't think... Well, look, it's interesting, but it's not exactly fireworks to announce an NHS online service. That will be a large part of his pronouncements. I doubt it will be the biggest rabbit in the hat. Normally they keep a little something or a big something in reserve, but we're not doing that today. We're doing, if not fantasy politics, then certainly theoretical politics. And we are wondering what you, or I am wondering what you want to hear in the speech and what you don't want to hear in the speech. And already on my text, some of the answers to the second question are potentially a little bit more interesting or a little bit more significant than the first question. And I may argue with you. Okay, I hope you're used to that by now, but this isn't just a collection of contributions. It's also a discourse about what he should and should not be doing. And I have views. 18 after 10 is the time. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. Alex is in Glossop. Alex, what would you like to say?
Hello there. I think the thing that frustrates me most about, I think it is the breed of political leaders that we've had over the last 20 years. Oh, also, hello, James. Very good morning to you. How are you?
Go on, carry on.
Oh, okay. So it's the watering down of it's the political language that is at the moment feeding over into a much more divisive era of politics that we're seeing on the rise at the moment. You hear in the mainstream media and from the mainstream parties, you hear the talk of the rise of the far right. Yes. And I feel that this is a watered down term. I feel that a spade should be called a spade and a fascist should be called a fascist.
I mean, I may agree with you. I may even do it myself, but I don't. And it is it's a compelling argument that Keir Starmer should offer much more resistance to what is seen as the rise of fascistic tendencies or even fascistic individuals, fascistic policies. But would it be good politics? I mean, this is the dichotomy between principle and politics, isn't it? That might be what you and I would like to see somebody do, but is it something that a conscientious and effective Prime Minister can do at this point in the political cycle or at this point in British history?
I agree. I think it is the obsession with the political game that has skewed all of our parties into this kind of quite wet place where sort of in 1997 Labour introduced new government. New Labour was introduced by Tony Blair, and they were a machine designed to win elections. And then the other parties, like the Conservatives and the William Hague, Michael Howard, saw how successful this was and were thinking, oh, well, we should try and adopt a similar policy, and became a machine to win elections.
Well, arguably, the Tories always had been. It's just after so long in power that the wheels are going to come off whoever you are. And I don't know that was the New Labour project. They had a lot more on their plate. I mean, they recognised the absolute importance of winning elections, but they wanted to win elections to actually get things done. It wasn't sort of a Boris Johnson or David Cameron dream, because I feel that being Prime Minister is commensurate with my opinion of my own talents. The Mandelsons and the Browns and the Prescotts, they had dreams for this country that they in part managed to enact. Here's the problem, and this is actually yesterday's show, the first hour of yesterday's show. You heard Keir Starmer at the weekend describe an obviously xenophobic and probably racist policy. There's, a semantic dispute over technicalities as a racist policy. And then you had right-wing media, and even some people who probably don't even consider themselves right-wing media, queuing up to lie about it or to completely misrepresent what he'd actually said, and to claim that he was calling everybody who was worried about immigration racist, which is what is technically known as a barefaced lie. So to suggest that he should come out today and call those people fascists is tricky, right? Or at least the leaders behind those policies fascist is not necessarily going to win anyone over.
It is tricky. I think it is the dismal state of political education in this country that means that a lot of people who hold certain sort of policy views and different opinions of certain issues don't know where they sit on the political spectrum. You would speak to a lot of sort of supporters of Tommy Robinson reform, and they would say, oh, I'm absolutely not a fascist. However, if you were to, without putting a name on it, highlight certain policies, and they would go, yeah, that sounds like makes sense. I agree. And it puts them within that camp.
And so I'm putting you on the list, but I'm not putting a tick next to it, which denotes my support. You would like Keir Starmer to call Nigel Farage a fascist in his speech today? He doesn't have to name any names. I mentioned to the person on the other end of the line that there are mirror images between what Donald Trump is doing in the United States, and of course Nigel Farage and reform seems to be a bit of a mirror of what MAGA is doing. A lot of my texts are saying I don't want him to talk about Farage. I think I'll wait for a caller before we dissect that observation, but a surprising number saying I want to hear more about him and I want to hear more about Starmer and more about Labour, not about the reform. And the problem is, of course, that the newspapers and some broadcasters are promoting reform and promoting Farage 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it feels like that is the biggest issue facing Keir Starmer. I kind of don't think it is. I think racism is one of the biggest issues facing the country at the moment, the rise of racism, and Farage is largely responsible for that. But I don't think that in political terms it's a prime ministerial priority, certainly not nearly 4 years out from a general election. Thank you, Alex. I've got very fond memories of Glossop. My dad used to take me swimming there on Saturday mornings, and we'd have a toasted tea cake in a cafe near the swimming baths every week after swimming lessons. Connor is in Glasgow. Connor, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
I kind of disagree with the last caller. I don't think Farage really should be mentioned that much at all. The main thing I see with the rise of Farage is just a complete general sense of being fed up in the British public. And a large part of that, I think, comes to the fact that we're not getting a sense of vision from Keir Starmer at all.
Yeah.
I couldn't actually tell you what the man believes in.
But I bet you know what his dad did for a living.
Yeah, he was. He made certainly quite a big one. But
Steady.
That's quite mean. Nah, no, I don't mean that. I really did wish that he would succeed, and he's got a chance to. I just think that he needs to focus on different things. So the main thing I'd like him to focus on is a readjustment on how we view tax in the country.
This again ties in with yesterday's show, but I mean, he may set the scene for tax rises later in the year when the budget comes around again. He certainly won't be announcing any today, but the rhetoric would sound a bit like, we need to do things and it will cost money, and we will have to find that money, and we will all have to put our shoulders to the wheel. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, instead of constantly promising not to raise things but somehow to magically improve public spending without raising public funds, he needs to break that spell.
Yeah, of course. The main one I think is what should be targeted first is council tax. I think that's quite broadly seen as one of the more regressive taxes in the country. And I think it's primed to actually get addressed within this Parliament, certainly.
I mean, I wouldn't hold your breath on technocratic tinkering. I think it will be increases to already established taxes that will be more or less unchanged in legislative terms. But yes, there is a growing sense, or at least I sense, a growing feeling that something is a little bit broken tax-wise in this country, largely because it's become gospel that you can't raise anything, and that if you raise anything, growth will stop. And that is true at some point. If you've got 98% tax, as we had in the 1970s, it's impossible to imagine anybody going the extra mile to earn 100 quid when they're only going to keep 2 of them. But certainly where they are now is not a point at which raising them a little bit would strangle or starve off growth. And we need more money. We need more money. The country, the government, the Treasury needs more money. Where's it going to get it from? 26 after 10. Nothing juicy yet, I would argue. I mean, the suggestion that he needs to go in harder on the far right, and then the alternative suggestion that he needs to stop banging on about that lot and focus instead on what his actual vision is. I'd probably land somewhere between the two. I think if you are facing a massive threat in the polls from a man who is a fan of Vladimir Putin, a champion of Brexit, an admirer of Liz Truss's economic policies, and a facilitator of Boris Johnson's premiership, then when an election comes around, you get hit with your record again and again and again and again. Oh, also, of course, a promoter of a man who accepts bribes from Kremlin stooges to pollute political discourse in the West. A close friend and colleague of Nigel Farage's, of course, pleaded guilty to those charges in court just last week, although you probably haven't read about that in the Daily Mail. Harry is in Edinburgh, staying in Scotland. Harry, what would you like to say?
James, how you doing? Absolute pleasure to speak to you. Listen to you for listening to you many years, and it's great to actually come and speak to you for our first time caller.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good. So just to kind of give a little bit of background, I'm from an ethnic background.
Yes.
In Scotland, as you can tell. I think there's a lot of kind of rhetoric in the UK at the moment with this whole right wing, and I'll be honest, I'm actually out for a walk this morning. I was at the shops last night, and I feel folk do take a second look at you
really?
nowadays, And I'll be honest, and I'm always been conscious of that, growing up in Glasgow and Edinburgh in the 90s. However, it feels that we're going back the way, and I know there's a lot of chat about the votes and things like that, which is absolutely fine. However, I think Starmer's really got to hit down on the celebrations that the foreign nationals that have helped build this country over the last few decades. In terms of you look at the NHS.
And he can do that without necessarily paying too much lip service to the people or the political figures responsible for the racism, the ones who are... And the problem is, I don't know whether you saw this, and I don't know whether it's in the print edition, but I think more people probably read the online edition today. But the Times newspaper, which used to be the most respectable newspaper in the country, the paper of record, carries a story today about some possible changes to the independent leave to remain rules for new arrivals that Shabana Mahmood announced yesterday. So that will be people coming here on visas to work as doctors or to work in the care sector or to work in manufacturing, and the bar is already quite high. And of course, while they're working for 5 or 10 years in order to move towards the indefinite leave to remain, they'll be paying into the NHS an extra surcharge, they'll be paying for their visas. So a lot of this is not known to the British public. But the Times newspaper illustrated that story about doctors with a picture of a boat, a dinghy, arriving at Dover. And that is the problem you're describing, that Starmer doesn't seem to be addressing. This nationwide, up to and including the current editor of The Times, a man called Tony Gallagher, who previously edited, you're not going to believe this, the Daily Telegraph, The Sun, and the deputy editor of the Daily Mail. They are deciding to put a picture of people coming in on dinghies on top of a story that is not about people coming in on dinghies. And you feel that Starmer's not doing enough to burst those balloons of bile.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would say the majority of the country, when they're going into the petrol station, they'll see that newspaper sitting at the side of the stand. They're just going to see the boats, and that's going to play in their minds even more. But yeah, that whole ILR thing is a massive piece, because that affects many members of my family as well.
I'm sure. Well, as I understand it, it won't affect people who are already here. The Farage proposals will. They could all get deported. But the new rules that Shabana Mahmood is going to bring in won't affect people who are already here. But yeah, it's a story about conditions imposed on people who want to settle in the UK with visas, as part of the post-Brexit immigration surge, and they've illustrated it with pictures of people falling off a dinghy, presumably in the English Channel. What would that sound like, Harry, in a sentence? Or not in a sentence, but what would that actually sound like?
Yeah,
From Starmer's mouth, what would he say?
I don't know. I think it's got to be a celebrate. I think the language has got to be very positive. There's so much negativity nowadays. I think we've got to celebrate, as I said, what we've brought, and I say we loosely in terms of any ethnic diverse foreign nationals moved to the UK over the last 5, 6, 7 decades. Talking about the corner shops. Let's face it, the majority are run by Asians, right? And they first thing in the morning to last thing at night, they're there. Whenever you need that emergency packet of fags, whenever you need emergency, we're there constantly. You go to a hospital now, the majority, I can speak for the one in Edinburgh and in Glasgow, majority of staff, well, doctors, not majority are still white, however, there's a good cross-section that are from a diverse background. So we've really got to celebrate what we've brought, as opposed to that, there's obviously this rhetoric that's going along in the UK at the moment where the nationals that are moving in are just draining the system.
Just try and recalibrate the conversation. So it's been dominated for too long by the xenophobics and the racist dog whistles, if not the actual racism that seems to be on the rise. You'll know more about this than I do, but the P word is re-entering public discourse in ways that we thought we'd got rid of in the 1970s and the 1980s, and the N word won't be far behind, and that is something that is a direct consequence of letting the sort of serial criminal Stephen Yaxley-Lemnon become some sort of rallying point for bogus discomforts. It is all about race, it's all about foreigners, and it is probably the job of the Prime Minister to remind us that we're built on diversity, we're built on immigration, and we absolutely depend on it. And he never does that. He hasn't made that case powerfully. In many ways, he's gone in the opposite direction. 10:32 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 25 to 11. Two texts that I want you to absorb in tandem. I think they sit alongside each other rather well, completely unintentionally. One from Darius, one from Matt. Let's do Matt's first. This is actually word for word what he wants to hear Keir Starmer say in his speech later today, and then a suggestion of what should follow. Sorry that we've seemed a bit distant, but we've wanted to get the foundations fixed, and now we're pushing forwards, writes Matt. And then the big policy announcements that people can see evidence of and feel straight away. You don't, Matt. Tell me what those big policy announcements might be, which is perhaps significant, but Darius happily steps up to support you when he writes, reverse Brexit, nationalise water and other utilities, a wealth tax and a change of the BBC's top dogs. Is that too much to ask? May I? Reverse Brexit, absolutely no chance, because it's not up to us, unfortunately, and the European Union aren't going to countenance a full return or even entry into the customs union or the single market, let alone the European Union itself, while Nigel Farage remains ahead in the polls, or even remains on the political pitch. The numbers of people who think Brexit were a good idea are negligible now, close to negligible, but the European Union isn't going to go through the trauma of waiting for us to make our mind up or helping us back in while the next government might take us out again. So that is simply not going to happen. Renationalisation, and it can sound sometimes like a bit of a panacea, but it would actually look big and substantive. That's when Matt used his capital letters, the big policy announcements. Changing the BBC's top dogs. There's only really one or two people in the upper echelons of the BBC who shouldn't be there by dint of the corporation's impartiality. Although it may not always feel like that, you'd just like some strong leadership and to actually start standing up for Reithian values rather than trying to please all of the people all of the time. But I don't know that it's a vote winner. And a wealth tax. I mean, some form of tax on assets, or at least perhaps a tracking so that I don't pay more on my income than that fellow over there pays on the profits he makes from his share portfolio in percentage terms. That's always seemed to me to be a bit unfair, but I understand the other arguments. And I think this text from another Matt has been sent to the wrong number. Can you grab the breakfast tea bags if they're still on offer, hun? Matt, I'll do my best. Where would you like me to drop them off? Phil's in Hull. Phil, what would you like to say?
Hi, James, Deputy PM in the House. Hope you're well.
Oh, yes. Oh, of course. Yeah, it's been a while. So there you go. I'm giving you the top job today. You're making the speech. What's going to be in it?
So I truly believe that Keir Starmer should be using this as his reset moment. So he is in a position right now where he's not, his approval rating is very, very low.
Yeah.
In comparison to
it's dismal.
Even Liz Truss and even some of the worst prime ministers we've seen in our lifetime. I think from the left and the right in general, I think he's not hitting those right tones. I think he can use this as a platform reset. Now, Labour came into an environment which was extremely hostile in government. So they had the riots, they had the prison crisis, and obviously the press have been very, very hostile towards him right from the beginning.
They've gone mad.
Right from his clothes,
they've gone quite mad. Yes.
To everything. So it's been they've not really had a chance to breathe, and they've had to try to hit the ground running. So I think. And
then there were. Hang on, don't gloss over the problems of their own making. The winter fuel allowance being one of the very, very first things they did, which was quite spectacularly unpopular.
I was actually going to mention that.
Sorry.
At this point, though, at this point, he needs to do an honest review in terms of things which have happened, which they've got wrong. So exactly that, the winter fuel. But it has to be done in a way which acknowledges who the Labour Party is, but also who he is. Because actually, unfortunately, we live in a world now where the cult of personality is so critical to the success. And if you look at organisations, for example, businesses who have inspirational leaders, that is what drives the whole agenda. Now, for good or for ill, Nigel Farage is in a position because he, as a leader, has resonated with certain subsections of people. Without him, then that party wouldn't be where it is, and that's because of it. That's because of his charismatic personality, however you want to call it. We saw it with Boris Johnson as well. Now,
a lot of the same people who fell for Boris Johnson's stick are now doubling down on Nigel Farage's stick, which is odd, isn't it?
Exactly that. But he needs to embrace that, and he needs to acknowledge that. And so, as well as giving an honest review of Labour and what they've, things that they've operated in, he needs to give an honest review of who he is, what he believes, and acknowledge he is not the most charismatic person, but he's in it for the right reasons. He's not a bad actor. He wants the best for our families. He wants the best for the nation, and the decisions he's going to take are going to be based on what he feels is going to make us prosperous a nation and fix. Because it's about fixing what 14 years of conservative rule has given us. Now, I think and somehow he has to connect with the hearts and minds of the people, because if people can empathise with him as a leader and say, actually, I understand why you're trying to do it, I understand why you have to make these hard decisions, then hopefully there'll be not with all, but hopefully those who are aware to be able to see what he's trying to do will give him that chance to say, look, we need to give him a chance to be able to drive this through, because there's like Nigel Farage who were trying to, who was pointing at the pound when Brexit had happened and it made money from disaster economics. This is We need the people who are genuinely in this for the right reason. And I know...
But we've been saying this since 2016. I mean, almost word for word, we've been pointing out the tension between people who are very good at stoking up feelings, usually very negative feelings, and people who are compelled to deal in facts. Boris Johnson got into Downing Street because the electorate prioritised feelings over facts. Nigel Farage won the referendum because the electorate prioritised feelings and lies over facts. And Keir Starmer doesn't, to me, seem to be currently equipped with whatever it is needed to steer the country back to a place where facts trump feelings and where the truth trumps lies. That's what you're saying to me, isn't it?
Yeah, but and this is where he needs to be able to connect. He needs to figure out, how can I connect with emotionally with the British public to say, I'm the right man and Labour's the right party to take us forward, because we're in it for the right reasons. And that's what he needs to try to get across, because if he cannot connect on that emotional level, because it is that feeling over facts, but you can have both. So he can connect on emotionally with people to say, you know,
we're here for you, and we've got a plan. I mean, all the calls today speak to a dichotomy, don't they? On the one hand, there is, I think, an understandable fear of what a victory for reform in the long-distance general election would mean. It would mean, you know, I just off the top of my head, it's Putin, it's Brexit, it's Liz Truss, it's Boris Johnson, it's all of those things having another go, as if somehow banging your head against a brick wall again and again and again and again will eventually damage the wall more than it's going to damage you. So he's got to be conscious of that threat. There's no threat coming from the Tories. Politics hinges upon tension and conflict and opposition. But equally, if you were battling against Keir Starmer, what would you be pointing at as the ideology or the credo that you want the electorate to reject? And at the moment, there's very little in that cupboard. You know, there are mistakes. You can say, this is the man who messed up the winter fuel allowance, and they can turn around and say, oh, yes, but we put our hands up to that and admitted it. You can pretend that he's responsible for the explosion in immigration that was caused by Brexit and Boris Johnson, or you can pretend that the small boats crisis is on him when it isn't. But again, that isn't evidence of his credo or his ideology. You can attack a politician for their beliefs. How would you attack Keir Starmer for his beliefs when nobody's really sure what they are? That's what you're speaking to. That's the problem that you're speaking to.
Yeah,
isn't it? Because you can't tell me, and I can't tell you what are his beliefs.
Well, that's the thing. But he needs. But this is on him, because he's a leader. He's a leader of a party. He needs to figure out quickly what is it. So
that's the word. We want to hear those words. I want to hear the word. It doesn't really matter what follows. I want to hear, I believe. I believe this. I believe that. I believe in Britain. I believe in Britain. I believe in something more meaningful than that. This is what I believe. This is who I am. And this is what my country has been, can be, should be, and under my leadership will be. Just jot that down, will you, and send it to Liverpool. It's 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:49 is the time. Big speech coming up at 2 o'clock. How big? This big. I don't know how big. Do you know how big? I mean, it isn't a career-defining moment for Keir Starmer. It's certainly a prime ministerial career or prime ministerial term moment, but not defining. Nobody's going to change their opinion profoundly about anything that's done or is likely to be done as a consequence of one speech. It's a Fleet Street disease, a journalistic disease, to think that these speeches can be of absolutely epic importance unless there's a meaningful threat to the leader. And there isn't. At the moment, as Andy Burnham has discovered this week, in no uncertain terms. It might be very, very different at the Conservative conference, given that Kemi Badenoch is currently presiding over the disappearance of the Conservative Party. But even then, I think they'll wait until probably disastrous results at next year's council elections before they start talking about a change of personnel at the top, with honest Bob Jenrick rubbing his thighs and licking his lips in expectation of that moment. So let's not get carried away with how important this is. But the worst things have gone. the more hinges upon these moments. And things have gone pretty badly. Not as badly as the right-wing media would attest, but pretty badly. U-turns are not a good thing. It's better than stubbornly pressing on a bad course, but the best thing you can do is I focus on the things that you've done right. And I'm grateful to Nick, who constantly sends me lists of everything that Labour has actually achieved. And it's really important. The increase in minimum wage, the £7,500 worth of childcare for all parents on reasonable incomes. The breakfast clubs, we heard yesterday from Rachel Reeves about the impact that they can have. NHS appointments, waiting lists are shrinking. The media, says Nick, don't want to report the positive changes that Starmer's government is delivering. And then you choose to criticise several of my colleagues, which is absolutely fine, but I'm always a little bit uncomfortable with that being done when they're not here to defend themselves. I would, for example, never let a politician describe a colleague as a moron without pushing back in the most robust of terms. But that's my moral compass. That's how I was raised. It doesn't mean that everybody else subscribes to the same school books. 10:51 is the time. What do you want to hear? And it's actually a harder question to answer than I realised when I asked it at 10 o'clock, because there's flesh and there's bones, right? There's style and there's substance. Starmer isn't going to be able to deliver a Barack Obama-style masterclass in oratory. Nobody in British politics at the moment can. But equally, even if he can't dress it up in beautiful words and delivery, what do you want the substance to involve? So I made a list. You got a few atonements. We're sorry about this, and we got that wrong. You want some celebrations, partly some of the stuff on Nick's list of what's been done. 28% increase for resident doctors within months of arriving. Sundry other wins. Hit them hard and hit them often. I think that's really good advice. Recognise the madness. I don't think you can completely ignore the threat posed by Farage, even though quite a few of you are saying that you don't want to hear his name mentioned, but I don't think you should. I think, patriotically speaking, a man who shills for Putin, a man who promotes to leadership roles, somebody taking bribes from a Kremlin stooge, a man who brought Brexit into the forefront of political discourse in this country, a man who thinks that Liz Truss was an economic genius, a man who greased Boris Johnson's passage into Downing Street. That, as a patriot, you should be repelled by anybody who embodies all four of those simple facts, simple truths. So I think it would be a mistake not to acknowledge it, but then you need to move to the next bit. Then you move to the things we're going to do differently. And I don't know what's going to be on that list. Richard's in Upminster. Richard, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about what he's for, not what he's against.
Yeah, good point.
And so I'll sort of cascade this down from the top. As a socialist government, I think he should be talking about what sort of society we want and how we want to make it fairer and stronger. And as a leader, he sees himself as a steward that's there to enable us to help create that society. So therefore, it's collaboration, not contract. And so, rather than talk about nationalisation, the old sort of left and right stuff, get him to talk about what I call like mutual equity, not private equity.
Yeah.
So, encourage us to own stuff, which means not just our houses and our homes, but also our businesses. So that kind of ownership partnership counters all the sort of the radicals' rights, but actually encourages. I
think you might actually get some of this today. Maybe not in terms of actual ownership of assets, but talking about the things that we do that bind us together. Yes, I think that's on the agenda. I think that's on the agenda.
Well, there is a specific, and coming down to a specific policy, which probably more relates to Peter Kyle. It's actually funny, ironically, it's something Cameron and Clegg introduced. It's called a employee ownership trust. So let's call all the workers, instead of joining unions, they should just own the companies, and therefore they are the shareholders and they become the wealth owners, and therefore it's not going off to the sovereign wealth funds, it's staying in the country, and that's part of building the community.
You're just veering into the technical. You're not going to get that in a conference speech, I don't think. But the idea
it's like
that
employee ownership, that sort of principle.
I think politics, and I don't want to sound like well, I don't want to patronise anybody, and neither do I want to sound like an idealistic undergraduate, but I'll probably end up doing both. It's a tension between workers and wealth, and it's not Marxist to point that out. It's obviously true that politics in the civilised world, or the Western world, or the whole world, has historically been, from ancient times, a tension between workers and wealth. Whether the workers are soldiers, whether they're farmers, or whether they're working in IT, it's workers and wealth. And one strand of politics in this country always protects wealth, and the other strand of politics in this country always protects workers. And Keir Starmer's strand of politics tries to ride both horses, which is why we use the word centrist. And what you want to see is perhaps a little less focus on protecting wealth and a little bit more focus on recognising and protecting workers.
Well, if the workers own the wealth creation, then
that's distribution.
Then you get rid of that argument completely.
That's redistribution. Well, that is Marxist. You're never going to get rid of it completely, because by dint of becoming the owners, they become the capitalist class, unless everybody's got one business with one employee, in which case we'd have a fascinating future, but sadly not an achievable one. I don't know, what would it sound like in words? Today, literally 2:10 today, Richard in Upminster's, the cockles of his heart start glowing because Keir Starmer has just said,
in strong community, which you are a partnership with me, and therefore I want to enable you, and we call it leading from the back, and I want you to own things and take responsibility to build society, and that means you could own the creation of wealth by owning your businesses and owning your own assets and so it's not a social contract, it's a social collaboration. So
no, I understand it, but I think you've highlighted, and I say this with enormous amounts of love, you've highlighted the difficulty of getting it all boiled down into a pithy little paragraph for a conference speech. But nice thoughts, nice ideas, Richard. From Richard to Ralph, from Upminster to Coventry. Ralph, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call.
You're most welcome.
Yes, what I would like to hear from Keir Starmer today is indication that he's moving the party a little bit further left, a little bit further towards traditional Labour. I fear that when he became PM, that his first actions seemed sort of very much anti-working class and not a great deal of help. I hark back to the Harold Wilson days when it was sort of the party lines were very clear. We lived happily in a society that
you're older than me, and I just say that statistically, but that's certainly not my reading of what happened in the 1970s. There's a reason why Margaret Thatcher swept to power in 1979, and I forget, was Wilson still in position for the winter of discontent, or had he shuffled off by that point? Well, you can't look back fondly on the winter of discontent, Ralph, can you?
No, I'm not. Oh. I remember it very well.
A little bit rose tinted. What would an announcement at conference today in a speech, whether it is substance or style, whether it's a sort of expression of a credo, an ideology, it doesn't need to be a policy, what would you want to hear him say?
It's a difficult one. Well, what can he say? I would like to hear him sound more like a Labour politician.
But what does that mean? What does that mean?
Like favouring working people.
But he says that all. I don't want to badger you, but he says that all the flipping time. All the time. It's all he ever says. Ordinary working people, ordinary hard-working people.
James,
as an extraordinary lazy person, Ralph, I feel very excluded by Keir Starmer's rhetoric and language. But if you were really paying attention and counting the amount of times he says the things you've just said you want him to say, you'd have run out of fingers long ago, and toes.
Yes, I agree, James. But there's no push through.
There's no push through. It's not landing. People don't believe him.
No, and that's a shame. And he's not a great orator, and that's not his fault. But I think he could take a more principled Labour stand, a more principled socialist stand, and be clearer.
But you can't tell me what that would look like.
Priorities.
You can't tell me what that would look like. I mean, renationalisation, they've done a bit, they've started on the railways. You can't really do it to water because there's 50 billion quid's worth of debt that someone's going to have to suck up. I tell you what I've learned this hour, and I mean this genuinely, I'm not being glib. he's got a much harder job than I realised. And I knew he had a hard job at 10 o'clock this morning, but and that's not because people calling the programme and texting the programme have been arguing with each other particularly. It's because they've all made meaningful contributions, but often quite disparate and quite different. And none of them, for me at least, landed very hard. None of them really sort of hit the buttons of, yes, that's what he needs to do. How many times in the course of the last hour, as we've taken characteristically clever calls from thoughtful, informed people, how many times have you gone, yes, that's it, that's what he has to do? I'll go first. Not once. I've gone, yeah, that's quite a good idea, carry on, but I haven't had one moment.
James O'Brien on LBC.
4 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I could carry on with that, but back to the anorak problem. That's going to become one of our new things, isn't it? The anorak problem. When I say one of our new things, I mean something I'll refer to quite often for about a month and then completely forget about. For about 6 months and then remember and wonder why we didn't carry on doing that quite often, like in my dayitis. I've actually got a missing word round for you today, but that's one of the features on this programme that doesn't have a jingle. I just saw James's face. James is doing Keith's job at the moment. I just saw him go, oh, my Lord, what's the missing word? We haven't got one for that, mate. You don't know this because you haven't worked with me very often, but it takes me years to get any production on this programme. The news agents, they get it before they've even finished asking for it. Emily Maitlis asks for something. She'll say, hello, could I possibly... and it's there. It's arrived. It's happened. I say, in January, can I have a jingle for missed information or... what else do we do? Something else hilarious. And 6 months later, I'll say, how are we getting on with that jingle? That jingle coming along? I don't know whether they're banking on me forgetting, which is fairly reliable, fairly likely to happen, or whether I'm just such a stickleback in the global radio pond. I'm such a tiny fish in this enormous pond that they just don't think it's worth bothering. So delivering the things that I have very politely requested. So we never got one for Missing Word Round, and we never will. I've given up asking. Unhinged headline was the other one, of course, but the Daily Telegraph is trolling me at the moment. They've stopped printing unhinged headlines. I don't know whether Alistair Heath has gone on holiday, but there has literally not been an unhinged headline in the Telegraph for ages. Someone sent me an unhinged headline earlier that looks like it's come from the Telegraph, but I don't know whether you were trying to get me into trouble by sending me one that you'd made up yourself or whether it just appeared on the website. If it did appear on the website, I will read it out later because it is incredibly unhinged. But they're not delivering. I got all the trouble of getting a jingle made up, and we played with it for about 18 months, did we? So it took 18 months to get it. We played with it for 18 months, and then the Telegraph has stopped doing unhinged headlines. I'll have to start reading the Daily Mail again. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. Is the email still up for listeners to get in touch about Woke Watch, asks Alyssa. Let me find out for you. Do we still have the Woke Watch email address? Did anyone ever check that account? Do you remember when people would send in stories that I'd be... This is what I mean about the support that I receive from my crack team of producers and supporters. Do we still have Did we ever check that account? We opened it. Is there anything... When's the last time you opened it? Do you want to know the noise that the producer just made? I'll tell you. She just made this noise. This is as I ask for production. This isn't the most popular show on the station by accident. I do actually know what I'm doing. So why, when I have an idea, does everybody completely ignore it? Anyway, James, don't worry. We haven't got a jingle for the Missing Word Round, but we do have a Missing Word Round today, which I will share with you now. Police express concerns over missing blank. Police express concerns over missing blank, and that will come up in the next hour. Now, we turn our attention next to an incredibly serious story, which is probably why I found it impossible to resist the urge to be a bit silly for 5 minutes. The last time I turned your attention back to the Middle East, the first half an hour of the phone-in was quite poor. And I don't mean that as an insult to the people who rang in. It meant that I did something wrong, and I'm a bit hypercritical of myself when that happens. Happily, it doesn't happen very often, but the calibre, the quality of callers that we have received on Israel and Gaza since the dreadful events, the horrific events of October the 7th, 2023, will, if I ever come to look back upon my so-called career, will constitute one of the things that I am proudest of. We have walked an absolute tightrope of sensitivity and reflection and received abuse from all corners of the conversation, but we have been resolute and successful in our attempts to properly track the appalling nature of the original attack, the necessity of a robust and meaningful response, and the dawning realization that Benjamin Netanyahu was embarking upon a genocidal course that would be not only the cause of untold deaths in Gaza, but also to the historic detriment of the modern state of Israel. And I think almost everybody has now arrived at that conclusion, has arrived in that place. You could argue we should have got there sooner. You should argue that we should have got there slower. But you can't argue really anymore that our fears were correct and our predictions have been realised. Which brings us to the latest announcements about a possible peace deal. It's probably wrong to describe it as a plan. It's an offer. Because, and this is the first point to make, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have put something together that they now want Hamas to agree to. And, of course, the last time Hamas agreed to ceasefire plans, it was Benjamin Netanyahu that broke the terms of those arrangements. And so, you know, the idea that this one will work. He's also gone on the record, according to the Times of Israel, as dismissing any possibility in the future of a independent state of Palestine, which is one of the underlying promises or presumptions of the plan that has actually been put together. All of which might make you think that I'm about to say it is a bad thing, but I'm not. You can. I've got two reasons for welcoming this development, despite the fact that the two men responsible for bringing it into the public space are deeply, deeply dangerous politicians, deeply dangerous human beings. I've got two reasons for welcoming it. The first is, if it works, the killing stops. Right? That is something that absolutely everybody should welcome, except people who crave more death. And there are people in that category. We know that there are. There are people in Netanyahu's cabinet who are in that category. And there are people in Hamas who are in that category. But if you're not in that category of wanting more deaths, whether of innocent Palestinians or innocent Israeli hostages, if you don't want more deaths, then you will want this to work. That is the first point of contention. I don't think that's controversial. If you don't want more deaths, you will want this to work. True or false? 0345 6060 973. If you don't want more deaths, you must want this to work, right? That's point one. Point two is the way in which it has been welcomed by Arab countries in the area, the way in which it has been cautiously greeted, I think for the reason one. I think that the reason two, is in place, why Arab countries are queuing up to cautiously welcome this proposal, is because they are in the category of wanting the killing to stop. You want the killing to stop. A 20-point peace plan, hostages released, killing over. Israel would actually surrender ground, political, philosophical ground. I don't trust Benjamin Netanyahu personally, any more than I trust Donald Trump, and I certainly wouldn't trust Hamas as far as I could throw them. But none of that matters to the central point of whether or not you welcome this, because it would mean that the killing stops. What is the alternative? The killing continues. So even if it fails, you have to welcome it now, because it's the only opportunity in existence. It is the only plan on any table that would deliver a cessation of killing, that would stop the actual killing. And if the killing stops, my other calculation is Netanyahu eventually goes. You never get rid of Netanyahu while this war continues. He won't go to court. He won't go to the country. He won't do any of the things that he would have done during peacetime, because he knows what the consequences will be. Removal from office and quite possibly removal of liberty. And when Netanyahu is out of the picture, then the possibility of forward movement returns, I think. I'm not an expert on anything, ever. But I don't know what the relationship between Benjamin Netanyahu and public opinion in Israel would be in the absence of war. I really don't, especially if Hamas have not been defeated, which is, again, a direct consequence of this particular plan. Israeli forces will withdraw immediately to an agreed line, to prepare for the hostage release. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, would be returned. Once all the hostages are released, Israel will release 250 life sentence prisoners plus 1,700 Gazans. I want you to pay attention to this sentence because it contains two words that you may not even know are there. 1,700 Gazans who were detained after October the 7th, 2023, including all women and children detained in that context. That's children locked up without any legal process or trial in some cases. Possibly in all cases, actually. I don't know that you can legally lock up children, except for obviously and easily proven crimes. And there is a lot of other stuff in here as well. No one will be forced to leave Gaza. Those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. That's an extraordinary difference. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. I don't know how much time you've had to process what is in this deal, but if you haven't had much time, then you can, like me, deal essentially with the headlines. This would end the war, and it has been welcomed by most countries in the Arab world. Therefore, we have to welcome it, right? Even with the caveat that it might not work. And that is what I want you to talk to me about this hour. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. How can you not want the best for a plan that delivers peace? A 20-point peace plan that, if it works, ends the war in Gaza and releases the hostages. And it involves concessions and surrender of principle or compromise of principle from Israel, which is, to me, the thing that has always appeared to be the biggest obstacle to peace from our side of the argument, as opposed to the Hamas side of the argument. How can you not welcome this? And that's a genuine question. So tell me why you like it, tell me why you welcome it, or tell me why you don't. That's all. And I don't know, I could be wrong. I always regret it later if I say to you, don't ring me if, because it turns out from your text that actually there were some really interesting points being made from precisely the constituency that I've just excluded from the programme. But listen, Israel only has one prime minister and the United States only has one president. And they're both in place for the foreseeable. So I don't know that we can say, I don't welcome this plan because of who has made it. I mean, I completely understand why it is a bit weird to have had a negotiation that doesn't involve one of the key partners in any peace process, but that is the only plan currently on the table, and Hamas have said they are examining it, quotes, in good faith. So apart from saying I wouldn't trust Netanyahu or Trump as far as I could throw them, apart from saying that, I don't know why you wouldn't cautiously welcome the proposals in the way that countries like Qatar and Jordan have done. But I could be missing something. The other element of this conversation that you may prefer, and I suppose we could move on to in the next hour, is Tony Blair turning up at the banquet, at the feast like Banquo's ghost. I don't know what your relationship is with Tony Blair or his legacy. I really don't. I'm not even sure what mine is. But given that you can't really say his name without somebody saying Iraq, the idea that you reintroduce him to the Middle Eastern melting pot with an incredibly important role, which essentially involves providing peace. I'm thinking of that Paul Whitehouse character. Is this inappropriate? I'm thinking of Tony Blair being played by Paul Whitehouse. Me? Leading a government, an interim government with my reputation. You know what I mean? You know the fellow I mean. I can't quite get my head around that either, but perhaps not for the first time. That may be a me problem, not a politics problem or even a Tony Blair problem. But we'll begin with the plan, okay? 0345 6060 973. Why don't you welcome it? And you can provide detail or even just sort of gut instinct, but I don't think, and you can tell me why I'm wrong about this as well, I don't think that reputational records of Trump and Netanyahu are reasons to say that it should not at least be tried. That's all. I'm not saying it's going to work. I'm saying it has to be tried. I'm saying it should be tried. Because what is the alternative? And if you ring me, that is the question I'll be asking you. What's the alternative? It's 11:18.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 20 minutes after 11, and just for the record, as it were, Egypt, Indonesia, Jordan, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey and the United Arab Emirates have, or the foreign ministers thereof, have released a joint statement welcoming the plan, in their words, the sincere efforts to end the war in Gaza, and assert their confidence, the foreign minister's confidence, in Donald Trump's ability to find a path to peace. The Palestinian Authority has welcomed it and praised the sincere and tireless efforts to end the war on Gaza. Hamas have said they're looking at it in good faith, while the Palestinian Islamic Jihad group say that the plan is a recipe to blow up the region. And on it goes. I just a quick word. I'll go to Tanner first, and then to Ray, and then quite possibly to you. The whole world, I want you to bear in mind whenever Donald Trump is discussed, I want you to have in your mind the image of him driving around King Charles's garden in a golden carriage. All right? Because the whole world have to treat him like a toddler arsonist. Like a delinquent 4-year-old with a petrol bomb in one hand and a Zippo lighter in the other. That's how you have to treat him. And it might drive you nuts that he has to be treated like that. And it might drive you even nutsier that some people who should know better can't see it as clearly as you can. But that's what you have to do. King Charles has to invent pageantry. You know, where is he going to go in the carriage? He can't go down the Mall because everyone will tell them what they think of him. And you know, I know he likes freedom of speech, but he doesn't like anybody else's freedom of speech. What are we going to do? I know. Let's get him in a helicopter, and he can get off the big helicopter, and we'll have lots of pom brass bands playing and drums, and we'll all wear our massive hats. And he can get in a carriage, even though he's actually already in our garden. And then we'll drive around in the carriage for a while, and we'll have more soldiers, and then some more soldiers, and then more soldiers, and then another brass band, and then some pipes, and lots of trumpets, and then perhaps another carriage, and then we'll all shake hands, and then he'll have some lunch, and then we'll put him in another carriage, and he can drive around the garden in the carriage for a bit, and then he can get back in the helicopter and fly away. That is what you have to do. And that's just when the stakes involve tariffs and hoping that he doesn't set fire to elements of the United Kingdom, metaphorically speaking. When it's the Middle East that's on the table, when the stakes involve a genocide, an unfolding genocide in Gaza and an opportunity of stopping it, then you wear kid gloves on your kid gloves, and then for good measure you put on some more kid gloves. And you approach this arsonist toddler, this delinquent 4-year-old with a petrol bomb in one hand and a Zippo lighter in the other. You approach him with the utmost caution. You give him all the sweets he can eat. You pat him on the head and tell him that he's wonderful. You indulge his ludicrous, egotistical monologues. You don't point out that you never ever point out that he's barely capable of stringing a sentence together unaided. You treat him like the golden child that he somewhere believes himself to be. And that is why perhaps the foreign ministers referred to are doing the right thing. Anyway, enough from me. Tanner is in Victoria in Australia. Hello, Tanner.
G'day, James. I'm just looking at this plan, looking through the dot points, the details.
Yes.
I feel like the point that's saying that Israel and America will allow immediate aid into Gaza and,
yes,
you know, machinery for road clearing and sewage repair and hospital repair and all. I feel like that itself is a bit of an admission of guilt to the genocide that's been ongoing. Like the people in charge, the people at the head know what's been happening. They know that the healthcare systems are decimated, that the life support systems are missing in Gaza, that the people are suffering like horribly. Like we've all seen it. Everyone's been watching it.
And that can push you in one of two directions. It can make you go, well, then it's a no-brainer. We have to do it. Or at least we have to hope that it works. Or you can go, this is arguably a proof of all the things that Netanyahu has claimed weren't happening. And therefore, I wouldn't trust him to deliver on this any more than I would trust him to suddenly discover an ability to fly.
I mean, I feel like I trust in the process for now. I can accept. I mean,
I think we have to, don't we? I mean, what's the alternative? So back to the drawing board.
Anything to stop the killing at the moment. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But I don't know how much I trust Tony Blair. Like, I'm a younger Australian bloke, but I understand the mess that was caused in the early 2000s with Bush, Blair, and I'm forgetting our Prime Minister at the time, John Howard.
In the Middle East. I wasn't going to open this particular Pandora's box yet. I was going to maybe save it until the next hour. But I guess if you were to be really generous, you'd say at least he's got experience.
Well, guys, like I said, I'm only 28 myself, so those things are...
Yeah, it was a disaster. I mean, it was a disastrous engagement, regardless of what you thought about the wisdom or otherwise of removing Saddam Hussein. The rationale provided for doing it was not honest, or rather, if it was honest, it was false. It turned out not to be true, and there was absolutely no plan in place for what would happen after the toppling of the regime. Yeah, and as a consequence of that, the world caught fire for a very long time.
The excuses did not justify the outcome.
No. I'm going to save that one, Tanner. I'm not going to open the Tony Blair box yet. I'm going to save that either for later in the week or for the next hour. In answer to the question of how could you not support this, even with both of your fingers crossed and all of your toes, you've got nothing, right? I mean, you have to support it.
I do support this. The Israeli regime has already agreed into it. It's being pushed by Donald Trump himself, so...
And that is reason to be hopeful. And as I say, with all your fingers and toes crossed as well. But what would the alternative be? Tell me why you don't like it. 03456060973. But remember, I'd have to ask you what you would prefer to happen. Tanner, lovely to have you on board. Thank you for that. Ray's in Vauxhall. Ray, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi. I think for people, I was going to say in inverted commas, don't really have skin in the game, but just want the killing to stop. Absolutely, like you say, if it means that no more children get bombed, children get food to eat tomorrow, 100%, it's got to be tried. Absolutely. But I can see camps on either side that won't accept it and why they won't. Well, no, I can't see why they won't. I can explain why it is that they won't.
Go on.
And the reason is, on the Israeli side, there are hardliners that made it as a requirement of this whole campaign to eliminate Hamas completely. That hasn't been the case. Hamas's leadership is still there, and it would look. I'm guessing it would look like a failure to them if they then accepted that, and also the hostages are still haven't been released. They would have to accept a ceasefire and then wait for hostages to be released. So that's the first thing on the hardliner side, and they are, war-hungry people as far as I can tell. On the other side of things, obviously people who are against what Israel are doing is a mixed crowd, but within that crowd there are people who believe this to be a political and religious conflict, and they believe that Muslims should have their homeland in Palestine, and they are willing to allow as much sacrifice as possible before that happens. So if it's a proviso that they have to accept not to have a Palestinian state, I believe those people will say, well, fine, we'll just keep going.
That is one area of fudge in the proposals, because the idea that the door is left ajar to the creation of a Palestinian state at some point in the future, which is a position designed to appease the constituency that you describe, and yet, according to the Times of Israel, Netanyahu has already made it clear that is not on the table at all. But Netanyahu is only one man, and this is only one period of history. So if the door is still ajar when he is no longer Prime Minister, then the possibility of a two-state solution or an independent Palestinian state is still alive, probably more alive than it was a month ago.
Yes, but I mean, this is what's slightly uncomfortable about this conversation, because I've had some conversations with guys on Speaker's Corner about Palestine, and their view on it is, these are young guys, 20, 21 years old, saying, look, generationally, we'll just keep going with this fight, and if people die, they die. But if we end up with a Palestinian state, then it's all been worth it, and that's how they look at it.
Yeah,
so I don't think they're not worried. That's the wrong word to say, but they're not
fighting either.
They're not exactly. It's a political theory for them. They don't care. They don't feel the pain that the Palestinians are suffering. They believe, I feel, that it's a willing sacrifice to make for the political aim of getting a Palestinian state.
And presumably that is the position of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who have said that the plan is a recipe to blow up the region. You've also got the former Israeli negotiator talking to Krishnan Gurumurthy last night on Channel 4 News, asked specifically whether it looks remotely credible as a plan. And this is where my treatment might end up looking quite simplistic. Daniel Levy replies, "I wish I could say yes because we're desperate to see this end. I can't say yes because it isn't credible. It doesn't have the things that you would need to implement to get a ceasefire, let alone get all the other high-sounding goals that the president seems to be setting out. This is more of the same thin, weak soup unseriousness that we've seen from this administration. How's it working out for you on Russia, Ukraine, I would say." And then Krishnan does exactly what I would do and points out that the Arab countries are on board and charged with getting Hamas to agree with it. And Daniel Levy responds, "Right, so Trump has appointed himself head of this board that will oversee the peace construction. Bad news, Tony Blair got a demotion. He's just going to be a member of the board, unlike the earlier speculation. But let's be serious for a moment. What you have is not really what's been missing for the last 2 years. You have an Israeli-American agreement. And that's where, I suppose, questions about the contributions of these Arab foreign ministers come in, because what are they doing? Are they just sending Donald Trump around the garden in a golden carriage, metaphorically speaking, or are they actually welcoming this as a viable and credible plan? And half an hour into this conversation, that question mark just got bigger. Ray, thank you. 11:31 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
26 minutes to 12 is the time. Eagle. Is the missing word round. Police concerned for missing eagle. I wonder who guessed that correctly. Nobody, judging by my... Also, even if you guess it correctly, I always think you're lying. I always think you're cheating. Nobody would arrive at that conclusion unprompted, would they? You're not going to guess. That's why it's a missing word round. It becomes a missing word round if it is impossible to guess it correctly. So police concerned for missing blank. And all the possibilities you put in there, swans even, would be quite funny. A lot of people said that, which is accidentally quite close to the correct answer. But nobody is going to say eagle. Police concerned for missing eagle. 25 minutes to 12 is the time. We're talking about the 20-point plan, which the former Israeli the former Israeli negotiator, Daniel Levy, described or pointed out on Channel 4 News last night, is actually an Israeli-American agreement, although we've subsequently learned that Hamas are currently studying it, in their own words, quotes, in good faith, end quotes. And in some ways, the question I'm asking you is, why on earth wouldn't you trust this guy?
Israel than I have, in addition to negotiating the Abraham Accords. I like to say it that way because the real people, that's what they call Abraham. I would say Abraham, but it's so much nicer when you say Abraham. So much more elegant. But the Abraham Accords, they're amazing. Jared, you did that along with your group of geniuses.
Okay. I remember, he's a leader, not a lawyer. Go on, while we're at it. Here he is again. Well, you can work out the context for yourself.
Agency in United Nations was interesting because, as you know, a few days ago they introduced me. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. I'm looking at my teleprompter and the thing was dead, stone cold, dead. The thing's up here. I have a long, beautiful speech to make. I'm back 30 feet back, and I'm saying, they're introducing me. There's nothing on my teleprompter. So, but I made a speech. I actually got good marks. You think Biden could have done that? I don't think so. I don't think he could have done that. I don't think too many people could have done it. But actually, it was actually more of a speech from my heart, if you want to know the truth. I think it was maybe better in certain ways because it was from the heart. It has to be from the heart. Otherwise, you're in big trouble.
So that was an aside in the middle of a conference designed to announce the peace plan. He's talking about the teleprompter malfunctioning at the United Nations. He also claimed that when his sort of photographer went up the escalator backwards in front of him, which caused the security to trip and the escalator stopped, he claimed that was all part of some sort of mad conspiracy to embarrass him. But, I mean, why wouldn't you, when you're talking about the possibility of bringing peace to the Middle East, why wouldn't you go off on a tangent about a teleprompter at a conference a week previously? And, of course, why wouldn't you bring Joe Biden into it? That's a completely normal thing to do. And that is the tension, really, in the rather more serious question that we're asking, because this is the guy that the world arguably has little choice but to queue up and cheer as he announces a plan for peace. He is a ridiculous and dangerous human being. Dangerous and ridiculous in equal measure. It's 52-48, really. And he is reportedly desperate for a Nobel Peace Prize. But you have to set all of that aside, I think. I think you do. And say, I hope it works. But does that make you a mug? So when somebody as qualified as Daniel Levy points out the implausibility of the plan and cites Russia-Ukraine as perhaps the best available evidence of what an effective peacemaker Donald Trump is, do you end up being naive or foolish in saying that you want it to work or you think it might? And then the scales tilt again because you've got the foreign ministers of many, many Arab countries, quite a diverse bunch, queuing up to welcome this development, to welcome this intervention. But are they doing so because they feel they have to, because they're waving at him as he drives around a garden in a golden carriage? Or are they doing it because they think, unlike Daniel Levy, that it has legs, that it is plausible? And I don't know. And you don't know. Who knows? 0345 60 60973 is the number you need. It's 11:39. Shaf's in Willesden. Shaf, what made you pick up the phone?
I actually... First-time caller to your show, James. You're my favourite.
Welcome. Thank you. Flattery gets you everywhere.
I need your help with something. I'm a bit on the fence. I'm a bit lost here.
Yeah.
I said to your researcher, when I first heard the speech, I was elated. You know, there was that feeling of relief. It felt like something was actually happening.
Yes.
And then as time went by, and I started looking, I watched the with Daniel Levy, what you were saying.
Yeah.
There's a couple of other political analysts over in America that I listened to, and once they started, really going into depth about what was happening, it seemed to me that there was no substance in it. Oh, okay, the killing stops. That everybody wins. Personally, that's how I feel. The killing stops. You know,
I think there's substance in it. I mean, there's 20 detailed points.
Forward,
yeah, go on.
But if you go further into the future, it just seems like, okay, so the Israelis will get their hostages and Palestinians will stop being killed.
Yes. I thought that phone line was sounding dodgy. I don't know that I can help you because it sounds to me like you've been on a similar journey to mine. But maybe somebody else can. Jenny's in Binfield in Berkshire. Jenny, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Well, what I want to say really has been said by yourself and a few others, but yes, I desperately want this peace plan to work, but
I want Kidder Mr. Harriers to win the FA Cup as well.
Yeah. You have to be cautious with these two men. When have we ever seen Netanyahu stand at a microphone without saying we're going to annihilate Gaza? And suddenly, overnight, there he is smiling, yes, we're going to have this peace plan. And I thought, forget it, mate, I don't buy it. But I desperately want it to work because I just can't bear thinking of these Palestinians and what's happening to them all the time.
I'm trying to get Shaf back up, actually. Just keeping an eye on the clock, and I think you've got another call coming in as well, Jenny. That's outrageous behaviour. I can't believe that you're speaking to other people.
No,
that's all right. I'm teasing. The only optimistic thing I can think of is that Netanyahu can't carry on doing what he's doing without the at least tacit support of America, of the United States. And if it has been made sufficiently clear to him that he can no longer count on that, then I think I can just about accommodate your reservations.
Well, the thing is, I just wonder, and this might be sort of a laughable thing, but I just wonder what Israel has on Trump, what Trump has offered Israel in return, because I just don't believe that those two men can put together a safe, positive deal that's going to help the Palestinians and the Israeli hostages. I just can't. But I want it.
I think this is, if not a consensus, it's coming close to unanimity in that everybody wants it to work, but the likelihood that it will feels pretty slim. Partly because of the characters involved and their track records. I mean, you wouldn't buy a second-hand car off either of these. Maybe you wouldn't buy a first-hand car off either of these men, I don't think. But I guess this is when hope gets you, isn't it? That's that old line from that film, Clockwise. I can cope with the despair. It's the hope that gets you. It's the hope that gets you every time. And listen, there are things on the table. There are quid pro quos in place. A Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energise Gaza will be created by convening a panel of experts who have helped birth some of the thriving modern miracle cities in the Middle East. That sound you can hear is dollar signs appearing in the eyes of Donald Trump's backers and quite possibly family members. Literal dollar signs. So, you know, what's in it for them, as ever, follow the money, and in Donald Trump's case, the ego as well. The possibility of a Nobel Peace Prize, which does seem to animate him because they had the audacity to give one to a black president. And Donald Trump still hasn't come to terms with that fact. Thank you, Jenny. David's in Putney. David, what would you like to say? I'm being defeated by my switchboard now. It's coming up to 11:44. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Quite what the alternative would be remains unclear, but the presence of Tony Blair at the table is going to be one that, for many people in this country, is somewhat hard to countenance. We may get onto that in the next hour. Let's try one more. Tarek is in Chiswick. Tarek, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, mate.
First of all, I'd like to say something. You know, sometimes people may take offence at things. It's important to draw a distinction between the Jews and Israel. Now, when it comes to the peace treaty or the proposed peace plan, I mean, I don't know if the world has lost its bearings, but the two people that are in charge of this peace plan is a man who, rightly, like you said earlier, you know, going up on escalators and complaining about that in the middle of a very serious. in the middle of a very serious.
One is a dangerous idiot, and the other has enacted a genocide. But I'm going to push because I'm going to run out of time. So I'm just going to push you to, in rejecting this, what are you opting for?
Well, look, I believe that Israel has a sinister plan behind this. I think that we have a moral duty, and that is to impose what is right. And what is right is that Hamas leaders and Netanyahu and his government must be brought before the courts so that justice can be served.
And in the meantime, the killing continues.
Well, absolutely not. No.
What then? How does the killing end? I don't want to harangue you. I don't want to harangue you, but it's already 11:45, and I said from the outset that look, this is slightly mealy-mouthed, milquetoast hope that the rest of us have been describing. The rest of us have been describing. You're rejecting the plan, and I'm asking what you're going to put in place today instead of it.
Well, the reason why he's allowed to continue is because no true sanctions have been imposed on Israel, and Netanyahu has a overwhelming backing from the USA.
Yes, and you're not going to change that.
Well, what we can do as a nation is impose sanctions. That's what we failed to do.
What happens in the Middle East? Between Gaza and Israel, between Hamas and Netanyahu? What replaces this plan? I'm not going to ask you again.
Okay, I understand, but what we do now will ring around the world.
Well, that's just a platitude. That's a platitude. What are you going to replace it with?
Well, the fighting must stop, but
that's a platitude. Under this plan, it stops, if it works, which is unlikely. No. But what is the alternative plan?
Under this plan, we take a painkiller to an ongoing migraine. All we do is turn off the senses.
That's another platitude, mate. In terms of a plan, I mean, listen, it's incredibly imperfect, but it's got 20 points in it. Yours hasn't got one.
Well, I believe both sides, that's Hamas leaders and the Israeli government, both must not be in office for sure, and therefore, international forces must impose peace. Peace can sometimes be imposed forcibly.
That's World War III. Potentially. I warned you we didn't have much time, and fair play to you for having a crack at it, but here's a 20-point plan put together by a man who's enacted a genocide and a man who is one of the most dangerous idiots in the history of humanity, but it's currently the only plan on the table. and imposing or having war in the Middle East, particularly a Western-inspired war, as you seem to be suggesting, the West going in to lay down the law in the Middle East, I'd cautiously suggest that hasn't gone too well historically. 11:47 is the time. We stay in America, or we stay with elements of American politics next, when I introduce you to a photojournalist who has been covering ICE raids in the United States and got shot for his troubles. It is 11:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 to 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's not the same as covering Gaza, obviously, where you can't get any foreign journalists into the territory as a consequence of Israeli rules and Israeli enforcement. But it is sometimes hard to get an accurate picture of what's going on the other side of the Atlantic because of the scale and the speed of the madness that's unfolding. How confident are you, for example, that you could tell me now what is going on with ICE raids, and indeed anti-ICE protests? This is the agency that Donald Trump has instructed to essentially round up people who may be in the country irregularly. And some of the footage is extraordinary. I saw a bloke in a cowboy hat yesterday. They've almost all got their faces covered. Some of them do not seem to be... there was a chap recently who dropped his gun and then pointed it at the crowd while his spectacles slipped down his nose. They don't look like, I don't know quite what the phrase would be, the most effective operatives in the history of security services. But they are charged with undertaking raids that have caused enormous upset and disruption and, of course, captured, in some cases, people who've turned out to have every right to be in the country. You're kind of guilty, as I understand it, until you're proven innocent, but that's all I know. I'm seeing clips, I'm reading stories. I don't know how big it is. I don't know how driven. I don't even know how you join ICE, but I do know that you need journalists on the ground telling you what is going on, which brings us to Nick Stern, who is a photojournalist based in the States but originally from Britain, who was covering an ICE raid in Los Angeles a few days ago and who joins me now. Let's start, before we get on to what happened to you that day, Nick, which is grim enough. Tell us a little bit about what you were reporting on, if you can. I mean, it's a standoff between not actual ICE operatives. It's a protest against what they are doing.
Yeah, in general, what we've seen here is ICE. ICE will go in, they'll raid a premises, be it a factory, be it a Home Depot, where you get what we refer to as day labourers here. They'll go and raid that place. They'll snatch people up you've probably seen without any identification, with their face covered, and these people are put into unmarked vehicles and whisked off. Then what happens as a reaction to this, you get local people. Sure, there are activists who are going out actively protesting this, but there are often members of the local community who are going out as well to protest this raid, and then meeting force from law enforcement, be it the police department or sheriff's department, or from ICE themselves. And this is, turning into, more often than not, a confrontation of some type. Sometimes it's just a verbal confrontation. Sometimes vehicles are getting blocked. Sometimes ICE are immediately turning their, what we call, less lethal weapons on the protest to try and quash the protest and get them to disperse. Which just seems to escalate things. And
how widespread is it? Do we have a picture of how much is unfolding and how often?
Well, it seems to be more widespread in the blue, the more left-wing states here, in Los Angeles, New York, of course. They seem to be leaving the red Republican states pretty much alone. So it does seem to be in retaliation for the politics of the state as much as immigration itself.
And I don't know whether or not people voted for people working in places like Home Depot to be caught up. I mean, a lot of the rhetoric in the run-up to the last election was about people crossing the border from Mexico and about gang members and criminals and drug dealers and cat eaters and dog eaters. Was there any form of mandate for treating people who are working and presumably paying taxes in this way?
No, there wasn't, and they probably realised pretty early on that that would be a vote loser. But the type of people being rounded up now are not these rapists and murderers and repeated criminal elements. They are exactly as we've said, they're construction workers who are outside Home Depot picking up work. They are gardeners. We've lived in the same house for around 10 years and had the same gardener during that time. About 3 months ago, one day he just didn't turn up. And we've not seen him since. We've messaged him multiple times. There's been no response. So whether he has, shall we say, self-deported or whether he has been picked up at one of these raids, we don't know. But most people in Los Angeles will know somebody who is either undocumented or going through a process of being documented. And they are school teachers, they are gardeners, they are construction workers, they are serving staff in restaurants. The state pretty much runs on people with various forms of documentation and entitlement to be here.
Let me take you back to that day in June when you're outside the Home Depot in Paramount, just south of LA, and you are chronicling it, you are taking photos when things took an unexpected turn.
Yeah, I was there. I'd been there for much of the afternoon. There were a group of about 200 protesters and about 150 sheriff's officers, and there was effectively a standoff between the two. There was nothing that looked like it was going to turn into a riot, but there were things like plastic bottles and stones being thrown, and I was actually hitting the leg while shooting photographs of people that were doing nothing more than waving flags. There was no threat from the people around me. And surgically, I had emergency surgery. I was rushed to hospital by ambulance, had emergency surgery, and this is a 3D replica of the thing that was removed from my leg. It's referred to as a flashbang. It's an exploding device which is supposed to be fired 20 to 30 feet over the heads of a hostile crowd to get them to disperse. But instead, they were firing these, what appears to be at body height, and one embedded in my right thigh.
I presume you were wearing the correct vests and identifying paraphernalia to let anybody present know you were a journalist, that you were working.
Yes, exactly. I had my press ID hanging on a lanyard around my neck, and I had a big professional camera in my hand. These devices and any less lethal device are supposed to be used to target individuals who pose an imminent threat to the safety or life or whatever, not randomly shot at a crowd. That is not their intended use.
Are you all right?
I'm recovering. I've just been discharged last week by the surgical unit here in Los Angeles. I'm still going physical therapy. I have a 2-inch scar on my thigh. Good Lord. Still gives me pain, and obviously the flashbacks are pretty traumatic as well, I must admit, being in that situation and having to rethink it.
Do you have any recourse? I mean, under law, or will there be any consequences for the person that shot you?
Probably absolutely not, personally, to him or his department. I'm British. I'm not into, I don't come from this culture where everything is a lawsuit. But unfortunately, here in the US, there's very little recourse. You put a complaint into the sheriff's department in this case, and it will probably get dismissed, and you'll be told there, whilst things could have been done differently, they see no reason for disciplinary action or change of policy. And the individual officers who fire these things or brutalise people or shoot people even with live rounds are very, very rarely disciplined. There's no recourse other than a civil lawsuit.
You may not want to answer this, it's a slightly unprofessional question, but what do you think's going on? I mean, you've mentioned the likelihood of these kind of operations unfolding in traditionally Democrat areas. So that speaks of a political agenda. Do you want to go any further? What do you think the motivation is here for these tactics?
Yeah, I'm happy to go down that route because I think it's part of the whole strategy, part of the whole policy. You cannot carry out this government's plans, whether it's what they have on the table now or Project 2025, you cannot carry that out without installing fear in the general population. We saw last week Trump say that he wanted to, or was designated Antifa as a domestic terror organization. Now, that in itself isn't an isolated thing. People can be stripped of their nationality if they are deemed to be a member of Antifa. And it's going to become like witch hunts. You'll get somebody pointing a finger, oh, he or she is Antifa. And you'll then get people stripped of their naturalization.
And the fear is a necessary prerequisite to what follows? Would you go as far as fearing, for example, that the midterms may not happen if he can create a large enough atmosphere of emergency, completely bogus as we've established, but nonetheless persuasive? What's the aim? What's the end game?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you paused there before you said temporary blocking or pausing the midterms.
Yeah.
And people usually take a pause before they mention the word civil war because it just sounds so bizarre. But so far, if we look what was laid out in Project 25 and Project 2025 and everything that all the commentators have laid out as to what would happen, we're seeing those unfold now, from military being moved in, opponents being arrested and stripped of any power that they may have, and potentially, martial law being imposed. So ultimately, Trump can take, shall we say, a more draconian, a more authoritarian rule, which is the only way he can get his plans carried out.
Final question, Nick. Thank you. When we knit all of this together, everything we've talked about during this conversation, what has it all done to your relationship with your job?
I was born to do this. I was put on this planet to document history as it happened. From an early age, I was fascinated with these people that were going out there photographing history being made. But it's made me even more cautious when I'm out on the street. If we've just got a moment, covering protests in the UK, you have to be cautious of perhaps protesters who don't want their photograph plastered over the Daily Mail the next day with perhaps a brick in their hand. Here, you get protection from the protesters. They thank you for being there. And it's in fact law enforcement who you have to be cautious of and really watch your back from.
Wow. Can I buy you a pint next time you're in London?
Most definitely.
Nick,
sorry, go on.
Well, thank you. And I hope your recovery continues apace. I really do. Nick Starmer, a photojournalist, telling you the reality of what is going on in the ground in Los Angeles and elsewhere in the United States, up to and including the moment he was shot in the leg while photographing peaceful protests against ICE raids, speaking to us from Los Angeles. And you won't have seen that necessarily, will you? But you can have a look on YouTube later. He held up, because we had him on Zoom, he held up the projectile that was embedded in his leg, and it was about the size of a small cup. It wasn't like a bullet, as you'd expect. As he said, it's a flashbang. You're supposed to fire it into the sky so that it explodes up there. I mean, and this is the United States of America in 2025. It's 12:02.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Wes Streeting, I'm told, making quite a punchy speech in Liverpool to the Labour Party conference. He will, of course, be followed at 2 o'clock today by the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, a speech that I am certain LBC will be taking live, and after which Sheila Fogarty will be inviting your opinions and reactions. I don't know how to handle this ICE stuff. That's why I'm so glad Nick was available today. Because it is absolutely... do you want to say terrifying? Yes, I will. I'll say absolutely terrifying for a number of reasons. The problem is I've never been adjacent to fascism before. I've studied it, in places like Italy or Chile. I've never actually been adjacent to it. I've never seen it unfolding in my own language, in my own part of the world. And I feel close to the United States, like almost all British people do. And you don't know what are echoes of the past, what are unique to the current moment, and how ridiculous it can be at times as the stranglehold upon democracy tightens. But these characters in their ludicrous outfits and their homemade masks are ridiculous until they've got someone by the throat. There's some fantastic footage yesterday of a food delivery guy who just shouted F Trump at them. That's freedom of speech, freedom of expression. It might not be the sort of language you encourage your children to use, but it would be positively mild compared to what many New Yorkers at the Ryder Cup were shouting at the European players. So I'm just pointing out that these verbal interventions are not usually controversial in the United States. But he shouted it at some ICE agents, dropped his phone. When they noticed that he's dropped his phone, they ran for him. To do what? I do not know. Just to arrest him or to incarcerate him for the crime of being brown in public or being Hispanic in public. But he escaped from about 20 of them on a bicycle. And I watched it. I nearly told you about it yesterday, but I thought this isn't really going to work on the radio. And I watched it. And this is what I mean about not knowing where the line is between ridiculous and sinister. But I suspect that fascistic movements always walk a line between ridiculous and sinister. They're ridiculous until they're not. This was still ridiculous. I was watching it yesterday, and do you know what my thought was? By dint of being quite puerile and childish, someone needs to put this to Benny Hill music. And then somebody did. That's right. Sometimes you remember why you loved the internet back in the day, and you're reminded that Blue Sky on a good day can have moments of what Twitter used to be. Somebody put the Benny Hill music to the footage of the cyclist or the food. I think he's a food delivery driver, evading and eluding 20 lumbering ICE agents, and anyway, it cheered me up. I'll try and share it with you a little bit later. I'll also try and share with you a little bit more of Wes Streeting's speech, which is looking good. It's certainly getting the crowd going, and he appears to be calling for the return of Angela Rayner, which I think most Labour supporters would welcome. Okay, so with AI, you know how we are playing it. We're coming back, we're circling back to AI-related issues on a fairly regular basis. You might think not regularly enough. I don't think you would think too regularly. I think we're probably open to accusations of not being alert enough to what is going on. And the reason for that is that you don't know what is going on. Well, no, hang on. I don't know what is going on. And nobody knows for sure what is going on. But you do know more than I know. So if you are, like me, largely in the dark about these matters, let me bring you up to date with how this programme has reported on AI. The best way that we've done it, or at least the best way to mark the speed with which things have changed, was when people would ask AI to construct a monologue on a given subject in the style of James O'Brien. I'm not being self-referential. Well, I am, but I think with good reason. And the first ones that came in were rubbish. And this is only going back, what? How far back was this? About 18 months ago? About 18 months ago, you would send me an AI-created version of my own monologue, and I would read it and think, this is absolutely pants. I'd never say that. That's just rubbish. And then about 6 months later, we did it again. And you sent me a version of a James O'Brien style monologue as envisioned by AI. And by then I'd come to a slightly better understanding of what was going on. And it is feasible that hour upon hour upon hour of my monologues have been crunched by the algorithms to a point where you can ask for a monologue on a given subject. It could be anything from, pigeon fancying to customs union membership, and they would deliver a monologue in my style. And 12 months ago, I would read it and I'd think, actually, that's not bad. That line there, I could have probably said that. And then you fast forward another 6 months, and the monologues were being sent in to me, which made me sort of go, crikey. I know it's not me, but I don't know if everybody would know it wasn't me. I can tell that's not me. But could everybody tell that's not me? One of the giveaways, actually, was the absence of umming and ahhing. There was nowhere near as much sort of what you'd call verbal chin-stroking and going off on crazy digressions. But you must be able to train AI to go off on crazy digressions. So halfway through a monologue about pigeon fancying, I might suddenly start talking about lunar probes for no particular reason. But they hadn't quite got that yet. And that was 6 months ago. And there we are. I don't know what they're like now, but pretty soon they're going to be almost perfect, aren't they? They're going to be almost indistinguishable from what we would laughably call the real McCoy, i.e. me. So it's focused my mind on a question. And I think I'm going to be okay. I can't quite see AI doing this yet. And in a way, I can't quite see AI doing it ever, because and some areas of broadcasting could be susceptible to it, but, we've spent a lot of time together in many ways. If you've been listening to this programme for a long time, we've grown up together. I got stopped outside the British Museum the other day. I was with my oldest, and this lovely, lovely, lovely lady said, I remember when you were born. And that was nearly 20 years ago. Eldest. Sorry, not old. Is it eldest, not oldest? Why does everyone always correct me? I'm quite good at this, You'd have thought after all these years you'd give me the benefit of the doubt. So I remember when you were born, that was such a lovely thing to say. It's like we have a relationship with each other, even if we've never met. And I don't know that AI will ever be able to replicate quite that. Not least because computers can't have children or get married or share stories from their own lives that resonate with yours. The other story in the news this week is about an actress called Tilly Norwood. She is on the verge of Hollywood superstardom. She's a London-based girl-next-door starlet, it says here, preparing to sign with a major talent agency. But she's not real. She is AI. She is manufactured by artificial intelligence. Do you want to know a little bit more about her? She didn't go to one of those sort of theatre schools. She's a working class actor whose skill for acting was discovered almost by accident, a bit like Owen Cooper, the star of Netflix, who just won an Emmy. She's been manufactured by artificial intelligence and is completely fake, and yet can still apparently be poised to become the first AI actress to be signed by a real-life talent agency that normally works with humans. At least that's what her creator has claimed. I don't know how feasible that is, but if it's not true today, it quite probably will be tomorrow. An AI actress. So I don't think that this job is vulnerable to AI replacement today. But I think 6 months ago I'd have laughed at the idea, or at least 18 months ago I'd have laughed at the idea that an AI actress could be getting parts in films at some point. Listen, don't at me to tell me it's not true or it's an exaggeration, and certainly don't at me, as Mark has done, to tell me that you went to school with her mum. That's very good, actually, Rod. Stop distracting me while I'm trying to keep you interested. I think we're going to do it like this. So the other story in the news is about the role that AI will play in transforming the workplace. The headline on the BBC was 1 million jobs in London, count them, 1 million jobs could be changed by AI. If your job particularly involves repetitive or automated tasks, then the impact could be significant. And then it begins to look at jobs. When it says could be changed, I think that may be something of a euphemism. It actually means jobs could be abolished. So 18 months, possibly 2 years into our AI chronicles, and one day I'll probably suggest that we should put together all of the programs we've done on AI and put them together as a single, easily digestible package. And then I'll forget that I've asked for it. And 6 months later, I'll say, have we done that thing yet? And everyone will look at me blankly. But if you listen back over the last couple of years, the way we've chronicled the rise of AI has been incredibly illuminating. And it's taken us inevitably to this point. What jobs are definitely going? What jobs have already gone? And what jobs are definitely going? And on the first question, it doesn't have to be a job. So it doesn't actually have to be a full role that has now been replaced. It could just be things that you used to do that AI is now doing. I think the world is divided into people who are using it quite a lot and people who are not using it at all. I think once you start, and I am, for the time being, I'm in the second category, but I've got people living in my own house who are in the first category. I think once you start using it, you're never going to stop, because it is. It's like a catalyst. It's like having a fast forward button for processing information. It's an extraordinary gift, an extraordinary tool that can do more and more and more and more. But I just want to do it from the most human of perspectives this afternoon. And I want you to tell me what has already in your world been replaced by AI. And what jobs, either tasks, as in jobs, tasks, or jobs, as in jobs, livelihoods, has it already replaced? And what is it going to replace next? So you don't need to know much about it. You just need to know how it works, how it's already impacted on your world, and what tasks it's already doing, and what jobs it is likely to replace in the near to middle future. All right, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I mean, as an employer, perhaps you've already got AI doing stuff that you had human beings doing a year ago. 2 years ago. I really want to talk to you. What is gone?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 20 minutes after 12, and I suppose in some ways the other call I want is if your job is gone. Your job is going. You can feel AI slowly or quickly taking up more and more of your profession, of what you used to do for a living. Because I don't think you can exaggerate the significance of this moment. It doesn't necessarily mean that we should all be frightened, although I'm probably going to ask you that question as well. What do you do instead if what you have done for 20 years is now completely redundant? Because everybody is going to get AI to do it for, if not free, then for a tiny, tiny fraction of what it would cost to get you to do it. And I think I'll reserve a special prize, which will be a mystery hour round of applause, a special prize for the person who surprises me the most. So we could call it our surprise prize. It's our surprise prize. The person who surprises me the most, the person who says AI has replaced my job, and then you say I was do you see what I mean? Professional Lego designer. I don't know what would surprise me until you surprise me. That's the whole point about surprises. If I knew what was going to surprise me, it wouldn't be a surprise. There you go. That's a fairly meta phone-in for you. Give me a ring and surprise me. It has to be true. And you know what I'm saying. It's something that will surprise me. And then the more you know about this, the more qualified you are to answer the final question, which is how frightened should we be? How frightened are you of AI? All right? 03456060973. Eftal is in Hackney. Eftal, what can you tell us?
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
So you are mentioning, talking about AI and how it's putting pressure on
Yes.
certain fields. I am a creative. I've been a graphic designer for the last 15 years. And funnily enough, even as a graphic designer, I started a business recently, and I have used AI to create every asset that I needed to start the business.
Gosh. So that would
I've
you'd have once gone to a graphic designer for that work.
Of course, I mean, I would have done it myself as a graphic designer.
And do you need particular skills to instruct AI?
Nope.
But you sound a little bit like, forgive me, a turkey ringing me to tell me how great Christmas is.
Well, it would at the start of AI. It was no, it's funny. I love it.
Go on.
At the start of AI, it was great because I could use the tools to increase my workflow. But now that AI is literally everywhere, all of my full stack knowledge, from making websites to all the way down to business cards, logos, and everything else, everybody can do it at the click of a button. My job has fizzled out very quickly.
I mean, this is the perfect example in a way, because I've got to get my words right. You're proof of your own imminent redundancy.
Exactly.
But I mean, it's a weird. So I'm setting up a what do you call it? I'm setting up a graphic design agency because I want some work, but I'm getting AI to do the work that I need to do to set it up.
Exactly. Do you see how quickly my field is becoming redundant? The creative field, in this sense, like whether you're making assets or websites or whatever it is.
So when do you call it a day, if that's an appropriate question?
Well, the moment there's a tipping point, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's when enough people have realized the capacity of AI and have integrated it into their daily lives, that's the tipping point. When there's a certain percentage of people, that can use AI, start to use AI.
So the only people that are going to come to you are people who haven't got their head around AI yet?
100%. That's exactly what my industry is right now.
Well, this is a head fry, actually. I mean, that is one of the strangest things I've ever heard. And that I wouldn't use me, I'd use AI, but people who don't know about AI will still need me. So I'm setting up a business to be me, to do me.
Exactly.
And when they come to you and say, can you do this for me? You're going to get AI to do it anyway.
Yep. That is precisely my industry at the moment.
I mean, I normally offer people an opportunity to promote their business at this point in a conversation, but I don't know if there's any point in you doing that, because anybody who is thinking I need a graphic designer is now going to be thinking, oh, scrap that, I'm going to find out about this AI business.
Well, lucky for me, James, I'm moving into a different field. I'm trying to buy and sell collectibles, so I'm moving into that industry
the opposite, because you can hold them in your hands.
Exactly, physical.
Collectible
Moving into
what?
the physical industry. Toys, card games.
I like
anything
it. There's a shop on Charing Cross Road,
isn't
isn't there, that's just open, that's doing loads and loads of stuff like that. That's a massive growth area. Oh, well, good luck with it. Seriously.
Thank you very much, James.
No, I wish you well. Do you have a name for the business yet? Do you want to give yourself a shout or not?
Sure, thank you. Solaris Trading.
Okay, there you go. All your collectibles needs at Solaris Trading. And any branding that you see has been done by AI. 26 minutes after 12. That is one of those calls I will remember for. And I love the way Afdal's so matter-of-fact about it. I can't be across everything. I know sometimes you think, hang on, James, you do this for a living. How can you be educated in this way by callers? You should know about this stuff. I've got some experiences of it. I've got some mates who have told me what they've got AI to do in their work, and I've been absolutely flabbergasted by it. I particularly, I don't want to give too much away here, but somebody who needed something to be funnier than it was. And he went to AI and said, can you make this funny? And some of it missed the mark completely, and some of it was genuinely funny. So it's like reducing humour to an algorithm or a computer program. But if you look at 100 things that are funny, and then you are asked to make one thing funny, you've got a fairly good chance of being able to do it if you're an algorithm, if you're a computer. But that call right there about using AI to do the job that you have been doing through skill and experience for 15 years, knowing that the only people who are now going to come to you are people who don't realise they've got the technology on their phone to do what you do, to do what you have done for 15, 20 years, to do what you studied at college. They've now got the technology on their phone to do it. So why would anybody come to you? Okay. Right, you don't get the prize because graphic designer would be on my list of things that I feasibly found vulnerable to AI. Who's gonna surprise me? Jude is in Hammersmith. Jude, what would you like to say?
I'm a language teacher, second language, English as a second language, and I teach people from all parts of the world. And I've started depending on AI so much that I've started doubting myself, the options that it throws up, especially the question was, what have I replaced? I've replaced almost all the dictionaries, like French and Spanish, are the two other languages that I had to teach in. And if I want to translate, I have to look at the dictionary, translate or give the meanings. Now I don't have to. It gives me all the possibilities in no time. That's one thing. So the dictionary is out.
That doesn't. I mean, that's just a sort of iteration of online technology rather than specific to AI, isn't it? I mean, I've been using Google Translate for 10 years.
I don't know if it's that effective. This really gives me different scenarios, different options, how less or more intensive you want, in what context you want. It's all at fingertips.
When
you're teaching.
When will it replace you?
Oh, I hope it...
No, well, I do too. Does. Sorry, Jude. Come here, mate. Sorry, I didn't mean it. But, it's going to replace me one day, or a future me. Maybe not me, hopefully not me. But when could I conceive of... Because, I mean, people are already using Duolingo, aren't they? And online language schools. But when could an actual AI bot teach me French?
Believe me, sooner than you and I think.
Yeah.
Sooner than you, and I think I'm really, how can I put this? Concerned, the least that, especially I read an article, I can't remember where, last year I was telling your producer, there was a school or an establishment in London where they started teaching around 30 kids, no teacher in the classroom, only the AI. I was wondering how would they be managing that? How would a entire classroom, and these are kids, I teach adults, all right? So
that would be a fascinating social experiment because the pupils essentially would self-police. So it could either go Lord of the Flies, or it could become the most efficient way of learning because any children minded to disrupt the class are going to be dealt with by their peers, and obstacles to learning would be dealt with or removed by the people that want to learn.
I don't know if I'm going off track. The one consolation I had, the consolation is that, I mean, even if AI can do my job, it can do my job. For example, I ask my students to write essays and stuff like that, or give me a review or reports. They come up with things that, I mean, I haven't seen or heard. I've been teaching these people 3 or 4 years in a row, and I ask them, this is not you. Somebody has done it for you, either your peers, and yet it's okay. I mean, if you're using AI, but you don't know what you have reproduced. You're not able to explain to me what you have done.
For now, but I mean, we could be living in a world where you don't need to. I remember, I'm amazing how quickly everything moves. But we used to have debates about whether or not children should be able to take calculators into exams. And it would be no, because they wouldn't be very good at maths. And then you're sort of slowly realising in the course of a single radio phone, well, hang on a minute, they're never going to not have a calculator. So why do they need to be able to do things that calculators do? I mean, the reason why I talk of fear is a sort of imminent redundancy of humanity itself. Where we program everything to do everything to a point where one day we ask ourselves, why are we here? What are we for? And you turn to AI and say, what are we for? And AI says, I don't know. I think I just wrote a science fiction short story. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. An awful lot going on. And some surprises, and probably some things that I should know, but I don't. And you know that I'm always completely honest with you about my own areas of ignorance. But obviously, the world is divided. The population is divided into people who really get it and people who don't really get it at all. I don't think there's much middle ground. I think once you start using AI, if it is relevant to your daily existence, once you start using it, you will use it more and more. It will expand to fill all of the available space. And of course, if you haven't gone there yet, then like me, you're still going to be left reeling by stories like FTALs. The idea that you would recognise that it now does what you do. But for now, there are enough people around who don't realise that it does what you do, so they'll still come to you. But that is unsustainable. That situation isn't going to last very long. So what jobs are definitely toast? What jobs are already toast? And what jobs might be toast? 0345 6060 973. Claudia is in Wolverhampton. Claudia, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thank you for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Well, I am a digital photo restorer. I restore old photographs and I also colorize them. Now, I work mainly. I work for genealogists and family historians all over the world, and they basically send me the scan of their pictures. I restore it. I research the colors. I colorize them, and I send them back. Now, with the arrival of AI, and before there was ChatGPT, it is going back a couple of years ago, the first thing was the apps that colorize pictures. That in itself is artificial intelligence. This started to happen. People are now putting their photos through AI, through ChatGPT, and saying, restore my photo. And the photos are really shiny and really pretty, but the problem, thankfully for me, is it's not the same person. So if you put a photo of someone famous, it's different. But if you put a photo of a relative of yours and say, well, can you restore this photo? Yeah. It gives the wrong face. Also, in terms of
for now it does. For now it does. But it will learn.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, well, I don't know, because even with time, it's the question of the expressions. I don't believe, but then I am a 50-year-old bat. maybe lady. maybe I'm being over optimistic, but I don't believe it. It's not going to be for a while. And also in terms of historical colorization, which should be accurate, I believe that if you're going to restore and colorize a photo of your ancestors, you want to honor them, especially in a military photo. Yeah. You shouldn't have someone fought in World War I in the military with a blue uniform, for example. That kind of thing.
I don't want to rain on your parade, but I think your optimism might be a little bit misplaced. But long may it continue. Long may you stay in business doing what you're doing. But I think you might be vulnerable to AI sooner than you think.
Well, we'll have to see. What AI has allowed me to do, though, is it has allowed some aspects of my job to be quicker, which in its turn, it has allowed me to lower my prices because of it. So it swings and roundabouts at the moment.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, but I'm going to be haunted by FTAL throughout this conversation, and the idea that eventually the people that come to you will be the people who don't yet realise that they could get AI to do what you do for them. But let's hope that day is at least a long time off, albeit that the speed of developments thus far suggests that it won't be. It is 12:38. Thank you, Claudia. I mean, where else? What else is vulnerable? I mean, it's going to do everything. Do you know what I'm thinking of? Did you listen to Mystery Hour last week? Do you remember Jeff's question about pockets? I don't think that could ever be replicated by AI. Now, you might have thought it was rubbish radio. Happily, a lot of people didn't. Or do you remember the commentary on Donald Trump's visit to Windsor Castle that LBC very helpfully provided? I don't quite... Oh, no, maybe that one it could do, but it couldn't do Jeff's call to LBC to Mystery Hour last week. And that kind of suggests that to do this job, you probably need something that a computer can never replicate, and I'm going to call it humanity, and I'm going to sound like an idiot. I sound like an idiot. You don't have to nod quite so enthusiastically. I'll tell you what, if my job's vulnerable, your job's toast already. I don't know why you're nodding your head like that. I got my head in the sand, apparently. 12:39. You can't replace me with AI. You've got to feel something when you tune into your radio, even if it's anger and hatred. This is the very nature of quiddity, I think. Anyway, speaking of quiddity, Henry Riley's here to bring us up to date with the speech that Wes Streeting has given at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool today. It better be good, because I've been told that this is worth a hit with Henry.
Yeah, well, and not AI, the real thing. This is, I think, to be honest, James, this... I may have just heard from the next Prime Minister. It was an extraordinary speech at this party conference, and of course there's been all the sort of machinations about Andy Burnham launching a sort of failed leadership challenge on manoeuvres, and Wes Streeting very cleverly, I think, has positioned himself today as really the sort of darling of the party. And it's a curious position he's in, James, because he's actually, curiously, not the most popular within Labour. He's not sort of on the same level as say, Angela Rayner, and more on her in a moment. But today was the first time where, the members really took to him. You had a packed conference hall. There were around 10 standing ovations, which is, there's quite a lot of standing ovations for all the speeches, but there were an awful lot for this. And you contrast that with Shabana Mahmood's speech yesterday, and actually that point was almost quite awkward because of a lack of applause. But this is obviously right before sort of the warm-up act before Keir Starmer takes to the stage, and really packing a punch. Wes Streeting, firstly on Nigel Farage, he really majored in on the Reform UK leader. Take a listen to when he was talking about the party and in particular their approach to health.
We must win another fight too. One against the poison of post-truth politics. At Reform's conference, a discredited doctor claimed that the COVID vaccine gave our royal family cancer. And this man wasn't just some fringe figure. He's Reform's health advisor. Now, these anti-vax lies have consequences. They've led to the return of diseases we thought we'd defeated. Measles, whooping cough, children dying from preventable illness in this, the 21st century. When Farage was asked whether he'd side with medical scientists, he said, "I wouldn't side with anybody." Anti-science, anti-reason, anti-health. Nigel Farage is a snake oil salesman of British politics, and it's time to stop buying what he's selling.
Pretty categorical from Wes Streeting. They're also saying, Nigel Farage says, go home to care workers. We say you are home. And it was very punchy in the auditorium as well. The second point, I think this is
Hang on, just let me interrupt you there. I just want to clarify. All of that was true. Everything that Wes Streeting said was true. A lot of representations of what Keir Starmer said on the Laura Kuenssberg programme on Sunday are lies. There's been complete misrepresentation, and that, of course, is a challenge for journalists, but no challenge here. Every single thing that Wes Streeting said happened on stage at conference, but knowing Farage as you do, he will no doubt claim, he's not my health advisor at all. We just introduced him as a health advisor. We've had loads of people. There's thousands of people that have been described as our health advisors. It doesn't mean they're actually our health advisors. It's a taxi driver told me that it's perfectly reasonable to reject paracetamol, and that's the challenge that our profession faces, not rolling over in the face of all this snake oil and nonsense, but properly chronicling it. Carry on, Henry.
Yeah, well, and as you were saying, I mean, there is this line from Reform where they're saying, he's not our health advisor. But when he was introduced on the stage, David Ball, the party chairman, did say very clearly that he's helped them write the health policy, which would seem to me to constitute advice. But there we go. Angela Rayner, I think this is the part of it where Wes Streeting went a little bit off message. And I imagine, presumably, they didn't know whether they did in sort of Keir Starmer's camp. But Angela Rayner, of course, she's not here at the conference, understandably, and the health secretary today has announced this fair pay agreement. It's the first time ever, and this is essentially putting in law and practice £500 million to get rid of zero-hour contracts, the insecurity within the care system, but crucially gave that achievement, the praise for it, directly to Angela Rayner.
And there's someone else who's made a real difference too, who understands the struggle care workers face because she was one. She brought that experience to the cabinet table as the care worker who became our country's Deputy Prime Minister. Angela Rayner, this achievement is yours. Thank you. And we want her back as well. We'll definitely make sure she sees that. We need her back.
Which bit do you think might not go down well with Starmer's camp?
Well, no, I appreciate Keir Starmer is obviously still very close to Angela Rayner, but whether that is something you want introduced on the day of the conference speech, because I imagine Keir Starmer would inevitably be asked straight afterwards, well, is Angela Rayner going to come back? Is she welcome back? And it puts him in a slightly tricky position. But, I mean, with the Labour Party members, they're missing Angela Rayner. They very much want her.
When you say Streeting isn't that popular within the party, you mean with the members, with the MPs, with the kind of people, whether members or MPs, who really like Angela Rayner?
Yes, precisely. And everyone thinks that he's a fantastic orator, that he's very slick, and that's of course very popular. But there was a sense that he's obviously risen very quickly, and I think there's a bit of resentment there. But nonetheless, I think today he's really cemented himself as I sort of hasten to say a replacement for Keir Starmer, but certainly in the mix. The noise you can hear, by the way, James, I know there's a sort of obsession about queues in politics. The queue to get into Keir Starmer's speech is now snaking all the way past the LBC global stand. So people have got their lunches and they're waiting an hour and 15 minutes before the speech to try and get a good seat for the big speech at 2:00.
You're too young, really, for this to be true, but you started very early in life. You've actually attended quite a few party conferences, Henry. Where does this one fit in terms of buzz and feeling?
It's less of a buzz than last year, but I think because last year was a victory parade, of course. It was a few months after the general election, and so everyone was cock-a-hoop, as you would imagine. This time, because of the sort of forced reshuffle, because of the Lord Mandelson affair, because of opinion polls being sort of charged at all the various Labour politicians, there has been a sort of underlying tone to it, and there's a real split on reform. I was talking with a cabinet minister earlier saying we've got to keep going for them, as Wes Streeting was doing there. Other backbenchers say, could we please just stop talking about them, stop talking about Nigel Farage? But it's there's been a lot of anticipation for today, James. I know you'd expect me to say that, but there's a sense that Keir Starmer, rather than steady the ship, he's really got to put it out the bag today, because many Labour members here, all of them, they really want him to succeed. They like Keir Starmer. They know he led them to that general election win, but they just feel they've got to get something today. And from what I hear, it's going to be quite policy light, but quite politics heavy. So he's going to really sort of focus on getting that message across to the country, not really focusing on the minutiae, but trying to convey that vision that he's often accused of not articulating.
And you will be able to listen to every dot and comma live on LBC from about 2 p.m. today. Henry Riley, meanwhile, live from Liverpool. Many thanks indeed. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Henry and I okay for now. But AI perhaps snapping at our heels, and if not our heels, then your heels, and if not your heels, then whose?
James O'Brien on LBC.
51 is the time. A quick word of thanks to everybody who donated to the fundraising drive being undertaken by my young friend Isabel, who you met on Friday. She completed and also to the people who managed to supply her with a special sports wheelchair, which came through late on Friday afternoon. But she completed the Ealing Half Marathon with her top team of helpers and supporters on Sunday, and thanks, I think, to you, did break through the fundraising target on that wonderful effort. So thank you for that. And it is now 12:52. I couldn't quite. Sometimes I should know that this is going to happen. So Henry Riley there, just talking about Wes Streeting, describing the frankly disgusting spectacle of a discredited doctor turning up on stage at the Reform UK conference to claim that the King had caught cancer as a consequence of his COVID vaccine, and the idea of him being a health advisor to a political party with pretensions to govern this country is absolutely unbelievable until you have a look at what's happening in the United States and realise that anything is possible. And then I did a little comedy bit about how UKIP would respond to this. Sorry, Reform UK would respond to this, and it went something like, blah, 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 he's not really our advisor, blah, blah. Turns out it's actually already happened. So here's the Tice person speaking to a journalist on ITV.
Your health advisor, Asim Malhotra.
No, stop there.
Okay.
That is a disgraceful slander, and I want you to apologise.
Sorry?
That is a disgraceful slander. He is not a health advisor. He's never been a health advisor.
Okay.
And I want you to apologise.
I apologise.
Right.
I apologise.
Start again.
Asim Malhotra was at the conference recently, and he shared on stage that there was a view that the COVID vaccine was a significant factor in the cancer of the royal family. Is he still a part of the...
He's never been a part of our health team and view, and for anybody in the media to suggest he is a disgraceful slander, and I demand that be corrected and apologised for.
Well, I'm going to suggest that he is, but only because Dr. David Bull, who introduced Asim Malhotra to the stage at the Reform UK conference, said this.
Now, I know this chap because he worked with me to write Reform UK's health policy. From that, he's currently helping to advise RFK Jr. and the Make America Healthy Action Group. And today, ladies and gentlemen, he is here to tell us how we make Britain healthy again. Please welcome Dr. Asim Malhotra.
So this is very confusing. Let's have another listen to old Thunderchops saying that this chap is definitely not the advisor, and I demand that you apologise, and I'm a pompous prig who doesn't know one end of a... Have a listen for yourself.
Your health advisor, Asim Malhotra.
No, stop there.
Okay.
That is a disgraceful slander, and I want you to apologise. That is a disgraceful...
And now let's have a listen to the chair of Reform UK introducing Dr. Asim Malhotra to the stage at the Reform UK conference.
Now, I know this chap because he worked with me to write Reform UK's health policy.
So he co-wrote Reform UK's health policy, but he's not an advisor on health to Reform UK. One of them is lying. Let's make this absolutely clear. One of them is lying. Either Dr. David Bull was lying when he said that Asim Malhotra had helped him write Reform UK's health policy, or Richard Tice is lying when he says that Asim Malhotra is not and has never advised Reform UK on health matters. Should we do a text vote on which one you think is most likely to be lying? I apologise. They could or both just be incredibly stupid, couldn't they? But it would still mean that one of them was telling the truth and one of them wasn't. But it could be as a consequence of epic stupidity rather than epic dishonesty. So either Richard Tice is lying when he says this bloke did not advise us and has not advised us and is not an advisor. How dare you? That is a foul slur, blah, blah. Or Dr. David Bull, who presumably Richard Tice heard introduce Asima Holtra as the person that had co-written the health policies for this political party. Either he's lying or Tice is lying. Which one do you think is lying, and how likely is it that any of them get asked that question next time they pop up in a radio studio or television studio? About as likely as the chairman being asked yesterday about the leader of Reform in Wales pleading guilty to accepting bribes from a Kremlin stooge, a man that Nigel Farage considers to be a very close colleague and close friend. Quite extraordinary, really. Happily, the BBC did ask him a question about that. I also want to tell you that it was Sunrise Medical, the company based in the Midlands, that got in touch and drove halfway to London to meet with Isabel's team for that Ealing Half Marathon. So thank you to everybody at Sunrise Medical. You are absolute legends. And thank you to Paul, who heard that appeal on this programme and rang around his contacts to secure that special sports wheelchair. Back to AI. I bet you'd forgotten what we were talking about before all that happened. And I'll squeeze in one more call from Danny in Berkhamsted. What's it going to be, Danny?
Hi, James. Yes, so until last year, I worked in the field of helping companies automate processes that humans were doing. So essentially, the AI was replacing the humans in those roles. And so I have lots of examples where AI systems were set up and replaced those humans. Although I do want to say, in all that time, I never saw any single human lose their job.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
How come? Because they just weren't freed up to do other stuff.
Exactly, and generally a lot more interesting things than they were doing before.
But there has to be a finite amount of interesting things to visit.
Well, yeah, that's a broader question. But one of the things you were asking is kind of is what type of jobs are most at risk? And in my view, I have to say I find it slightly amusing hearing lots of people argue their case for working remotely. But in my view, anyone that does a job that could be done remotely are the people that are most at risk of being replaced.
That's an interesting way of putting it. But, well, yeah, I mean, up to a point, most at risk, because I could do this job remotely, and I don't think... I'm not at risk, am I, Danny? Be nice, Danny. Danny, be kind, Danny. Danny, kind, Danny, nice, Danny.
Well, I do actually know someone who's they made their living from doing voiceover work. And I was able, just for the purpose of demonstration, to clone their voice and then run some documentary.
That's enough. Thank you, Danny. Thank you. Have a great day. Cheers. You have been listening to James O'Brien on LBC. If you missed any of today's show, and it is real, human, visceral emotion that comes out of this radio, your radio, thanks to me, a human, every day from 10. If you missed any of it, you can rewind and pause and do all of those things. You can tell the producer hasn't even put that on my screen. If you were AI, that would have been on my screen before I started. It's already... Sheila's already here. It should have been on my screen 5 minutes ago. You can stay up to date on the top stories and opinions, put your news categories in the order you want, pause and rewind live radio, and listen to a range of podcasts. Just waiting to get it in the right bit of the screen. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4... You've done this before. On LBC, it's Tom Sawbridge, but now it's time for Sheila the Human Fogarty.
Sheila the Human Fogarty. Do you need to go to the opticians? Why is that so big?
I don't know. Because I've got a human producer, not the AI, that hopefully will be in position by this time next week.
That is hilarious.
It's nothing to do with me. Terry Wogan's auto cue apparently was like one word per screen towards the end of his TV career. His eyesight was
We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
Thank goodness.
James O'Brien on LBC.